In early 2015, the PlayStation 4 received its first high-profile exclusive. Other titles had reached for the crown, Killzone Shadowfall, Knack, Infamous Second Son, but none had garnered attention like this. A heady mix of gothic horror and pulpy science fiction set in the Victorian era, where vampiric aristocracy prey upon the downtrodden and the dispossessed, werewolves prowl the streets at night looking for their next meal, and all that stands between the common man and the supernatural world is an order of superpowered monster hunters wielding an assortment of strange but charismatic weapons.
You think we'll get to shoot a few of them rich folk?
This is not that game. Chapter 1. Introduction. Hey everyone, I just played The Order 1886, and I have several questions. First among them being, does anyone even remember this game? From the moment it was announced at E3 in 2013 to the moment it was released in February 2015, The Order 1886 was everywhere. Sony published behind-the-scenes featurette after behind-the-scenes featurette. The gaming press pushed hands-on previews and clickbait articles about what the game was and wasn't going to be. It was supposed to be a system seller, a springboard from which to launch a franchise for the PS4 console generation, and within a month of its release, it had vanished like smoke, as though it had never been there at all. And there's a fairly memorable reason why. Less than a month after the game released, Bloodborne hit store shelves like a nuclear bomb and turned The Order 1886 to cultural dust. That joke at the top of the video wasn't just for a giggle, it's almost uncanny how much Bloodborne succeeded at everything The Order 1886 was trying to do, and it's not the only time it's happened either. Half-Life did it to Trespasser back in 1998, the Dead Space remake did it to the Callisto Protocol in 2023. It's a kind of once-in-a-console generation disaster that doesn't even feel like it happened once it's over. Bloodborne was such a success it sold out in the Sydney CBD the day of release. I had to trek out to the suburbs to snag a copy on my way home from university. I couldn't believe it, that had never happened to me before, but they couldn't pay people to take the remaining copies of The Order 1886 off the shelves. Of course, Bloodborne wasn't the only cause of The Order 1886's failure, even if it is the reason no one had any reason to talk about it after March 2015. Like Trespasser, the game released in an obviously unfinished state, and like the Callisto Protocol, was built upon such rotten foundations of game design that it was hard to overlook the bad for what little good remained. But, also like its fellow generational failures, enough time has now passed that people are starting to look back on it with fresh eyes. It took Trespasser 10 years for computer hardware to catch up with its ambition and kick off its general reappraisal into a flawed classic. The Callisto Protocol isn't quite there yet, but check back around 2033 and I guarantee you'll see people coming around on that title too. The Order 1886 is currently sitting right in that sweet spot, roughly 10 years after release, where enough time has passed for the initial outrage to have died away, and it's still largely available due to the abundance of working PS4s. Now that the wounds have healed, high-profile developers have come out of the woodwork to talk through what happened with more candidness than they could when the pain was new. Articles and video essays are dropping, suggesting maybe everyone was too harsh on it originally and that it's worth a second chance. Sir Galahad, the Order's player character, even got an unexpected cameo in Team Asobi's Astrobot in 2025, a small but heartwarming admission that despite all that happened, the game is still part of PlayStation canon. Hell, that curiosity to see what all the fuss was about is the whole reason I was drawn to it, and why my patrons picked it in a poll when I offered them a few options on what to cover this month. Whatever happened to The Order 1886? Is it really as bad as everyone said back in 2015?
They're all but extinct.
You are wrong to speak of them in the past. They walk among us.
Yeah, it kind of is. That line stun-locked me, I'm not gonna lie. Why did she say it like that? Did she know it was going to be a meme? That's how you know the Order 1886 was dead on arrival. Even at the height of Among Us mania during the most delirious stir-crazy days of the pandemic, when people were grabbing every recitation of those two words they could find to slap into a meme, I never saw this one pop up. Anyway, my opinion of the game actually went down upon playing it again for this video. I didn't love it at release, but I went in with managed expectations and got a fun Friday night out of it. But the past 10 years have aged the Order 1886 terribly, lumping new problems on top of the pile already present at release. So let's talk about it. What made the Order 1886 a failure? Let me count the ways. But before I get my hands into the guts of this game, there are going to be spoilers throughout, so if for some reason you want to play it yourself, this is your only warning. Also, everything I make for the channel is now made possible by the generous donations of people on Patreon, so if you love what I do and want to support me with a few dollary dues, please consider supporting. If you don't want to give Patreon money or can't support monthly, Ko-Fi is also an option. Links are in the description. And if financial support isn't possible but you still want to help the channel grow, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and share it around because YouTube sure won't. Anyway, let's get to it. This is the Order 1886.
You!
Chapter 2. A Night to Forget. The game begins with our hero, Grayson, getting waterboarded in the dungeons beneath Westminster Palace. Immediately we're hit with questions. How did we get here? What did Grayson, or Sir Galahad to use his official title, do to end up disgraced and tortured on Her Majesty's dime? How long is this going to take? The Order 1886's opening scene is not a particularly extended sequence. It's only about 3 minutes long, but it feels endless. Something about the way it lingers lets you soak in the gratuity of the torture before having the player experience every broken, limping step of the journey back to Grayson's cell gives it a sour tone that doesn't so much create intrigue as exhaustion.
Sweet dreams, mate.
The problem isn't that the game starts slow, but that its focus is on the presentation over mechanics or story. You get a real close look at those classic British chompers, see the sweat running down the guard's paws like he's modelling for a face cream ad, and hear a frankly upsetting amount of grunting. It all looks and sounds incredible, but it doesn't offer the player any sort of narrative or mechanical hook. The guards don't banter about why Grayson is getting dunked, or demand he confess to some mysterious crime. It's like they're just doing it for fun. He doesn't plead his innocence or even try to fight back. You're not even given that option until the guards drag him back to the dunk tank like the sad sack of potatoes he is.
Here we go again.
And you still have to sit through another round in the water before you get the prompt, which you don't even have to take. You can allow them to dunk Grayson multiple times before their dialogue starts to loop, and letting it play is the only way to get any idea why they're even doing this.
Come on, give up your collaborator. It's that tasty bird, isn't it? Maybe I can give her a go, eh?
If you hit the button the second it appears, you'll never get to hear the only piece of genuine exposition in this scene. And things don't really improve once you do press it. Grayson breaks free and turns the tables on the guards, but once you deal with them, you're faced with the reality that he's still a badly beaten man who can barely walk. And if you thought having to watch him stumble around in a cutscene was frustrating, oh boy. Along the way you encounter more guards, but they end up preoccupied by some off-screen werewolves, put a pin in that, and also this dude. Combat in this game is divided between standard third-person cover shooting and quick-time event-heavy cinematics, and this is the first example of the latter. I have a lot to say about the cover shooting, very little of it good, but I do genuinely enjoy these cinematic fights, mostly because the deaths are very funny. Grayson's intercepted by the Marquis de Lafayette, who lets him go, put a pin in that too, and then you're chased out onto the roof of Westminster Palace where every other major character is waiting. We've got Lady Igraine, we've got Sir Lucan, we've got the Lord Chancellor, whose actor knew exactly what sort of project he was in and played the role accordingly.
You have betrayed our order! No one may escape the penalty!
You could let Grayson get shot in the head, but I guess we should continue the story. He throws himself into the Thames, and that's the prologue. Fucking hell. And here I was thinking this game would make for a good short video. Okay, so what is the narrative function of a prologue? Yes, we're fucking doing this. To set the stakes, to establish a tone, to build intrigue, to throw you into a situation without requiring too much context or exposition, like a wave crashing onto shore in a burst of action to draw you deeper into the setting when the tide then recedes at the beginning of the first chapter. Not every story needs a prologue, but when they work, it's magical. Take, for example, Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Nathan Drake wakes up in media res aboard a crashed train hanging over the side of a snowy cliff with a bullet in his gut. Stakes, intrigue, tone, action. And then we jump back to explain how he ended up in that situation. But in The Order 1886, all the things a prologue needs to function simply aren't there. We have no emotional attachment to any of these characters, and they don't offer any reason for the player to care, so the stakes are unknown, the mood is sweaty and sour, and the one moment of spectacle atop Westminster Palace comes too late after 15 minutes of dungeon and tunnels. There's a little bit of intrigue built by the werewolf attack, but it largely happens off screen, not affecting Grayson or the player at all, and the action is so laboured by the commitment to realism that only the fight in the elevator really stands out. It's a huge stumble, made even worse by the fact Chapter 1 does a much better job of introducing the setting in a fraction of the time. You step out onto a rooftop and bam, London. Not as it was, but as it might have been, with a skyline full of mooring towers, and the air thick with zeppelins. It's a true moment of spectacle that sets the scene instantly. You see how technology has advanced ahead of where it was in our 1886. You get a better sense of who Grayson is and what the Order does. You even get an early offhand glimpse of the United India House, which comes back in a big way later on. It's environmental storytelling at its best. There's also this line.
We may be pursuing Bedlamites, but they remain civilians. Use non-lethal force whenever possible.
That right there is what I like to call enough rope. It's a short walk down to where Lady Igraine is waiting, but if you take your time, you'll find the streets of Mayfair filled with people performing little micro-stories. The world, for now, feels alive. This piece is what you and the Order are fighting to protect. Holy shit! Actual stakes. And then you meet up with Igraine and immediately start mowing down waves of poor people and the mentally ill. Like, that's not even an exaggeration. Bedlamites have overrun Mayfair. Are you a cool enough knight to take it back for the fine upstanding citizens of London?
Use non-lethal force whenever possible.
Stunned! Take the shot!
The game doesn't even frame them sympathetically either.
You think we'll get to shoot a few of them rich folk? Huh?
And it never really stops framing them as enemies either. It's only in the last couple of levels that you start going up against an army of beefeaters. Even when you turn on the United India Company, you still mostly fight dock workers and security guards. Like, it's so tone-deaf, but in a very different way to many of the game's peers. It's not race that the Order 1886 hangs its problematic cap on so much as class. You are a superpowered immortal aristocrat held above the laws of the land, wielding weapons that can turn people to bloody chunks with a single pull of the trigger, fighting the downtrodden and the dispossessed, just looking to make enough money to survive the next day.
They tell you things have never been better. They tell you England is making progress. What's all this progress brought you? Hideous slums, some no more than crannies of obscure misery. Long hours in factories, only to be paid a pittance and told by your masters to be grateful for a few bob a week.
It's Call of Duty with a stiff upper lip, and in 2015 it didn't really even register with me how much time you spend killing paws, but in 2026 it is impossible to ignore. It's so ugly, especially since the game seems completely oblivious to what it's doing by framing the conflict this way. The characters certainly don't give a shit, as they flirt and banter through every combat encounter.
Igraine, we're in position!
About time!
How did you arrive here so quickly?
Skill, love.
I must admit, you do move fast for a man of your age.
Not cares to be reminded of his decrepitude by a fair damsel.
My lord, this damsel would never be so callous as to do such a thing.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. The Order 1886's politics are a game-wide issue, but it was such an unexpected slap to the face here that it immediately turned me against the protagonists.
Just get rid of this scum.
Literally 10 seconds later.
Everything to your liking thus far?
Quite. Just another ordinary London morning.
And it's not even as though they offer up anything to like about these people in contrast. They all act high and mighty about upholding the Queen's peace, and then the second things go off, they start killing everyone in sight.
We do not fight men, Marquis.
Paws, Irish, and the mentally ill confirmed not human, I guess. The smell wafting off the subtext in The Order 1886 is fucking rancid. Along the way you meet Marquis de Lafayette, whose whole character you can sum up with this exchange.
You are the most American Frenchman I have ever known.
I am a lover of liberty, mon ami.
Though at least his characterization as a charming rogue with a lady on each arm is characterization, so I'll take it. And while Lafayette is going, Lamau, fuck them all, let God sort them out. Really? Really, I'm going with that, okay. Lamau, fuck him all, let God sort them out. Grayson notices Percival meeting with a hooded stranger in the distance. Now, this might seem important. However, it isn't. The chapter ends with a battle with some werewolves in the London Underground, which is also, incidentally, where you'll spend like half the game because Ready at Dawn ran out of time to make more environments. And it's different because it's pulling from the Stalker set pieces in Dead Space 2 rather than the general combat loop of the Uncharted games, but you're still just killing poor people. With the fighting done, we discover Percival has captured one of the werewolves off-screen, and as he's being taken away, Commissioner Doyle shows up with evidence pointing to Whitechapel. This is Doyle's only appearance in the game, but he makes it count. It's him who first brings up the fact Jack the Ripper is apparently active 2 years early, and that Whitechapel is the home of the rebellion. Whatever that is, and then he's shuffled off screen, never to be seen again, even if he is mentioned a lot. Anyway, Doyle wants to keep the investigation with the police, but Percival's a loose cannon.
Knights do not relinquish their authority to bureaucrats.
Which leads directly to Chapter 2, where he brings the matter before the Round Table. If you weren't aware the Order was based on the Knights of the Round Table out of Arthurian legend, then Lafayette spells it out with this little needle of exposition.
Is it true? Did the Lord Chancellor fight by Arthur's side?
That is the legend.
Yuck. That'd be clunky at the best of times, but it's also a question a character would only ask if they're new to the Order, and Lafayette has clearly been around the block once or twice. He should already know that, though at least it does provide some context. Most of the Lord Chancellor's speech is utter brain rot, just a flood of words that make sense when you string them together, but mean nothing without any sort of context to back them up. London is infested with werewolves called Lycans, which the Order has apparently been pretty slack in its duties dealing with, and there's a rebellion stirring shit all over the place, making things even harder for them. Now, with all the love in the world, what fucking rebellion? We're 45 minutes in and we still haven't established what the central conflict even is at a foundational level, so instead we get,
Whitechapel is a matter for the civil authorities.
When the noble Arthur sought to contest for truage with the Roman Emperor Lucius, he did not trouble himself with issues of jurisdiction.
Do not presume to quote history to me, Sir Percival. I've seen more of history than you shall ever know.
They hold a vote, it doesn't pass, Percival storms off, whatever, and literally seconds after the Lord Chancellor expressly forbids Percival from attacking Whitechapel, he just goes to the guy's adopted son, Sir Lucan, and is like, "Can I though?" And Lucan is like, "Yeah, whatever, I don't care."
Whitechapel remains off limits. That is Officially.
You have my thanks, Sir Lucan.
Of your thanks I have no need. Bring me results.
Well, we're going in.
He's right fucking there, you idiots. Are you trying to get caught? The rest of Chapter 2 is spent hanging out with Nikola Tesla, which is pretty cool. He's got a whole workshop underneath Westminster Palace right out of a Bond movie full of fun steampunk gadgets like a gun you'll never get to use, an old order communicator, and a hacking device that is actually pretty neat. It's very tactile, I like the design.
All gibberish to me. Nikola.
And then it's on to Whitechapel to keep killing poor people.
A nest of cut purses, collaborators, and whoremongers.
You don't go in guns blazing though. The game does spend a little time taking you through the alleyways of Whitechapel, pestering the locals by throwing apples at them, which the greengrocer just allows for some reason. You can walk through a hostel, though the hostel might walk through you instead. You can listen to a guy talking about wealth inequality beside a hanged effigy of Queen Victoria, which I've got to say is pretty fucking metal. And then Grayson's immediately seen by a couple of rebels, so Lafayette takes them on a detour through the local brothel. Which is really funny because the brothel is actually the rebellion's headquarters. This is like trying to escape a bear by hiding in its den, but that's an irony you can only appreciate in hindsight. In the moment, I was more shocked that the doorman says no weapons inside, but lets Grayson and Lafayette keep their knives.
Oi! There's no weapons allowed in the establishment. You want to stay, you leave it here.
Bien sûr, monsieur. As a matter of fact, we were just looking for the coat closet.
Give it here. And have fun, governor.
I mean, it's not like there's a guy going around carving up women who murdered another prostitute just last night. Why would you take their knives? Don't be stupid. And yes, one of the working girls has her breasts out for the player to woggle, but it comes right after a scene where you see another prostitute getting beaten by who I assume is her pimp for not reporting the Ripper when she saw him last night.
How could I have known he was the Ripper?
So, you know, not the best time to have a pair of boobs shoved in my face, no matter how many polygons they put into the model. Lafayette hires a couple of girls to escape upstairs when the rebels immediately find them because, again, this brothel is their fucking hideout. How do they not see them across the room? Wait, is the doorman invisible?
Is it sufficient, monsieur?
More than sufficient, I'd say.
This whole exchange happens while the rebels are looking for them in the same room, by the way. They head upstairs and the knights duck away to escape the working girls who immediately flip out and mistake them for gay.
You're in the wrong room!
Where's the little frog gone?
He's in there! With his friend!
Oi! Get out of there!
YouTube be cool, she's on an exercise ball.
Oh! Hello?
And then you see the most realistic donger that you've ever seen just flapping about.
I'm so happy that video games have finally got to the point where we can have dongs just that's a thing.
Just out.
Yeah, just right there.
Someone had to spend
it was someone's job. Someone's job to
So-
render that dong.
This moment got clowned on to hell and back at release, and deservedly so. But it gets worse because it immediately leads into a fight with the ladies' naked John. Thank God they didn't have any weapons on them, things might have got violent. Yeah, very funny game. Somehow they get away with it. The rebels lose them because they're inexplicably even more incompetent than our heroes, and then it's back to killing paws until you meet back up with Percival and Igraine.
Percival. Percival, do you read me?
Save your breath, monsieur. The buildings are blocking the signal.
The curse of progress.
So buildings block the signal, but being underground doesn't?
Galahad, are you making any headway?
Did anyone proofread a word of this script?
Air Command, this is Galahad.
Think, monsieur.
You copy.
We are without sanction here. The Lord Chancellor will be most displeased. Lafayette does not fancy a court-martial.
We'll worry about that later.
No, is the answer. And in this instance, I don't care, because I fucking love Sentinel-5.
Sir Galahad, this is Sentinel-5. We have visual confirmation of your position.
Wait, use the monocular to signal Sentinel-7? Who the fuck is that? Yeah, just a short video on the Order 1886. It's only 7 hours long. How much could there be to talk about? Chapter 3.
We do not fight men, Marquis.
When it comes to combat, there is nothing the Order 1886 does that other games hadn't already done better. Cover-based shooting had been pretty well perfected with Gears of War on the Xbox and Uncharted on the PlayStation before the turn of the 2010s. There was very little innovation left for the Order 1886 to make on pure mechanics alone. The best I can say is that it's functional, which is still a jump up from the story, but it doesn't leave me with much to critique. I will allow there's a certain heft to every movement. You really feel the way Grayson slams up against pillars and barricades, but that's also to the game's detriment. The Order 1886 is yet another game to prioritize realism over mechanics, an interesting trend in these legendary failures, and in this case that means Grayson handles like a semi-trailer with a hitbox to match. He's a big guy who doesn't fit comfortably behind any piece of cover the game offers up, and enemies have no trouble taking potshots at him through barricades if they've got a proper angle, even if you appear to be completely protected. It gets even worse during the game's 2 instant fail stealth sections where enemies will notice him the second he leans forward to slip between hiding spots. The way he rises from a crouch to start moving when leaving cover makes sense when you look at it from a purely biomechanical standpoint, but from a gameplay perspective it just results in a lot of cheap damage, and that breaks verisimilitude far more than a wonky animation ever would. And even that heft in the animations is a lie, because Grayson can't stand up to a harsh look. At one point in the middle of a firefight, Sir Lucan kept shoving him out from behind cover to take the place for himself, and it drove me up the wall. Find your own spot, you bastard. It didn't quite drop Grayson dead, but it came close, and given Lucan is actually one of the villains, I almost wonder if it was intentional, but there's no way, that's too clever for this game. It had to be the NPC AI freaking out, and that's the funny thing. For an organization of immortal superheroes, the Knights of the Order are surprisingly fragile. A single bullet is enough to have them reaching for the vial of gamer sups they keep around their neck, something that happens multiple times across the story. Getting downed will have you reaching for it too. Normally health regenerates over time, but if Grayson takes too much punishment, catches a shotgun to the moustache or a grenade goes off on the other side of the map, he'll drop to the ground, and you'll have to keep him alive for a few seconds before he remembers, oh right, I'm an immortal superhero. The gamer subs will pop you right back up, but I'm pretty sure you only get it once per combat encounter. It's a health system that feels so out of place in a single-player title. The way you can crawl around when Grayson gets downed feels better suited to a multiplayer game. I can imagine a teammate rushing in to save the day while you crawl from the danger, but the NPCs don't give a shit, and the enemies are so aggressive that if you are downed, then chances are you ain't getting back up. It was only when they trick-shot a grenade right into Grayson's face, when they were still too far away to follow up the stun with the killing blow, that I ever had enough time to pop the cap on the Prime and take a sip of... I don't know Prime flavors, let me look it up. X? I don't know, Grayson looks more like a Meta-Moon kind of guy. Anyway, it's clunky, especially when you factor in how long it takes for health to regenerate. Enemies are aggressive, but not many of them advance on your position. Most just stick to their own cover. So there's not even the panic that comes in Uncharted or Gears where certain enemy types rush your position and you have to balance getting away from them with keeping your health up. There are exceptions, the so-called shotgun specialists always rush straight for your position, and they definitely took me for a ride once or twice, but the armoured heavies who show up occasionally mostly just stand in place and let you shoot them between their attacks. The snipers will take the shot the second you aim down sights, but they're never seen in conjunction with the shotgun specialists. The werewolves only ever appear in these special arenas, or else in big spectacle cutscenes, and the rest of the enemies are just random men wielding pistols and rifles. They at least give the impression of intelligence, but it's just smoke and mirrors, and the Order 1886 is really bad at hiding both. They call out your position and the weapon you're wielding, but they don't react to it. They stand in place and keep shooting until you notice them. They don't time their shots to when you pop out of cover. It's almost like when you aim down sights, a countdown timer starts, and when it runs out, whatever enemies have a clear target just light you up. The variety is already pretty anemic, but if the game ever bothered to mix and match some of its enemy types, at least it would add some complexity quality. As it is, it's just very functional. And the same could be said for the roster of weapons. The marketing made a big deal about the fancy steampunk guns you get to play around with, but they're either functional but unimpressive, like machine pistols that fire 20 shots a second, or a double-barreled 10-chamber revolver, or flash but useless. Take the arc lance. As the name implies, it sends out an arc of lightning that turns anyone unfortunate enough to be in its way to paste. But you can't just pull the trigger. You need to hold it down for a few seconds to let it charge, by which time you've already been sent to the prime zone. Just the idea of the thing is a collateral damage nightmare. As you can see when chasing this werewolf, the lightning goes where it pleases. The fact you don't end up turning your allies or civilians to bits is a fucking miracle, but it doesn't hold a candle to the thermite cannon, or, to use my own name for it, the flower rifle. It's a gun that requires both its main and alternate fires to use well. The main fire sends out a spread of what I'm choosing to believe is flour because it's funny, and the alternate fire sends out an incendiary to set it alight. It's scary to see in action. When the rebels turn it on the knights, you really feel how destructive it could be when used right. I just don't know why anyone would. What's the benefit of bringing the flower cannon to a firefight over a rifle, which only requires that you aim well? At least with the detonator you can blindly lob remote control grenades from behind cover, but this chonker of an artillery cannon requires you to expose yourself and hold down the fire button for a couple of seconds before it reduces everything in front of it to red mist. The falchion rifle at least gets the job done, but I almost never used its dry fart of an alternate fire outside of the tutorial, though I guess it could get you out of a bind with a shotgun specialist right up in your face. Overall, I much preferred the mundane weapons. At least they dropped enemies without putting me in danger. And if you're really in the shit, you can always fall back on your Deadeye meter. It may have a different name, but it's still just the Deadeye meter from Red Dead Redemption. Only you don't even have to aim when it's active. Grayson does everything for you except pull the trigger. And boy, is he a bad shot. So the cover shooting is a bit of a bust, but the cinematic fights are actually pretty fun. Sometimes it's as little as a stealth takedown, an unnecessarily brutal stealth takedown at that. Like, Jesus Christ, dude, calm down. Grayson doesn't even know if these guys are rebels. They could be completely innocent. He just does this to them anyway, what the hell? But at least the game usually takes the environment into account when delivering the killing blow. Much more fun are the fair fights. They may just be a string of QuickTime events, but missing one doesn't always result in a funny death. Sometimes the battle keeps going, taking the flow of combat down a different, messier route than if you instantly nailed each and every prompt. Plus, it's just good to see Grayson in pain. Yeah, get him! Oh! Ha! That one's my favourite. This one's pretty good too.
Shit.
The cinematic fights reach their absolute zenith with the two encounters with the Elder Werewolves, but I want to save that for a second to put them in context of the plot. The rest of the set pieces are, unfortunately, pretty bad. Take this bit where you have to drag an injured cop to safety. The movement happens automatically, you don't need to do shit. You probably don't even need to shoot the rebels that show up, the set piece is over so quickly. It just feels like it's here because there was a similar scene in Uncharted 2, and the injured cop here dies even faster than poor old Jeff. Grayson blinks and the guy's already dead. Also, I completely missed Percival BMing the cop here by drinking his immortality juice right in front of the guy until I was editing the video. Like, you can't spare your own allies a drop? But then something incredible happens. You're not going to believe this, but the Order 1886 actually gets good. Chapter 4. The Holy Grail. It sneaks up on you though. After meeting back up with Percival and Igraine, you arrive at the Royal London Hospital, which is infested with werewolves. Grayson calls in Sentinel-5 for air support, and it's great. Every second Sentinel-5 is on screen, I'm happy.
Sentinel-5, requesting an immediate sonar payload drop.
Confirming Gorton payload deployment. Requesting visual beacon for target location.
Damn it. Who has a transmitter?
Are you intentionally acting like an incompetent dickhead, or is the Order really this much of a shit show? Lafayette comes in with the save, as usual, and then...
Locking on beacon. Releasing anchor. Fulton deployment in 5, 4, 3, 2...
Incoming! All devices off!
1...
The sonar bomb scatters the werewolves, but you learn later through a collectible that it also took out the power grid across Whitechapel, Stepney, Shadwell, and partially affected several other London suburbs too. It would be evil enough to deploy this sort of weaponry against civilians of an enemy country in a state of war, but what the fuck are you doing using it in your own home? I understand the game is trying to present the Order as an overly zealous victory against the monsters at all cost kind of organisation, but it's such a heavy-handed example that they come off as worse than the supernatural creatures they're fighting because the game just assumes you'll be on board with the plan because they're the good guys. Their rampage continues into the underground, which the game sends you down into to reach the hospital despite the fact it was just on the other side of this fence. Like, you spend so much time running around underground tunnels, it's bonkers. And once you reach the hospital, Grayson sees Percival chatting with the stranger again.
Who's Percival talking to?
No one.
Correct. Your search of the hospital inevitably sends you down into the basement with all its spooky storage rooms and severed face displays. What?
The power's out in the basement.
It's the same here.
Gee, I wonder why. Also, what happened to the buildings are blocking the signal? But then, you find the boy. Now, I want to make something very clear to you all. In all seriousness though, this scene is great. Video games still struggle today with something as simple as having a character take off a shirt without it looking jank as hell. So to see a werewolf transform in real time without any issue is still very impressive. It looks painful and aggressive, and Grayson's panicked reaction sells the danger of the scene perfectly. It's still a little scuffed, like this bit immediately after requires no input from the player. Grayson's little legs are moving all on their own, and you lose the gun instantly either way.
Swine!
But after gulping down another vial of gamer sups, it suddenly becomes really good. In another game, the Lycan would hang back until you were in position, but in the Order 1886, if you don't move from this starting line, it'll still show up after a few seconds to tear Grayson's throat out. It chases you back up through the hospital to where Igraine is waiting, and you feel its presence stalking you every step of the way. It's not just a mindless beast as the others appeared to be. There's a vicious intelligence behind its eyes that gives the brutality of its attacks more weight than if they were simply the bestial flailings of a monster. There's physical weight too. The game successfully conveys its strength in the way it moves, the way it tosses furniture around like it's cardboard, the way it throws Grayson around like a rag doll. It finds Grayson again in the triage room as he's trying to reach Igraine, and the chapter culminates in a big cinematic boss fight. The actual mechanics of it are pretty simple. You have a light attack, a heavy attack, you dodge in the right direction when prompted, and in phase 2 you get a special attack that does a lot of quick cuts once you fill up the white bar in the bottom right corner. There's also a pipe you can pick up to deal out a little extra punishment, but it's the only context-sensitive attack of its kind. The real fun comes in the cutscenes between each phase, because they're fucking brutal whether you hit the QTEs or not. Eventually Igraine comes in with the save, but she's a woman so not allowed to do anything cool. The werewolf shrugs off the axe and breaks her back, fucking hell, which gives Grayson just enough time to recover and finish the thing off with the exact same weapon because he is, after all, our hero. The gamer sups restore Igraine to life, but it was a pretty gnarly injury. It still leaves her weak. She has just enough strength to spout some cryptic bullshit to Grayson before passing out, and the rest of Chapter 4 is spent rummaging around a side room in the hospital looking for the information she so desperately wanted to share with us. The rebels are planning an attack on the United India Company's flagship Zeppelin, the airship Agamemnon, which is bound for New Jersey across the pond. They've got UIC uniforms ready to infiltrate the crew. They've got the cargo manifest, and they've got a target, Lord Hastings. Hastings actually appeared in the Order's council meeting back in Chapter 2. It was him who prompted the vote on whether to authorize an attack on Whitechapel. Even the Agamemnon got a little set up with this conversation here.
I've heard many great things about the Agamemnon, Lord Hastings.
Oh, she is the finest the United India Company has ever built. I can promise you a pleasant and speedy journey across the Atlantic.
Can we expect your presence at the launch, Sir Lucan?
Would be my honor to see you off on your maiden voyage, my lords.
Now, this is actually really good storytelling. Hastings and Bigwig just seem like bit parts to show how the Order fits into the more traditional, real-world British aristocracy, and how Sir Lucan is closer to them than other members are, like our 4 alleged heroes. It also shows that he's busy, which explains why he's willing to indulge Percival to get the guy out of the way. As with the United India Company building back in Chapter 1, this is really good setup for when Hastings and the Agamemnon come back into the story here in Chapter 5. The Agamemnon, my beloved. It is by far the best environment in the Order 1886. Just look at it. I've fought my way through countless slums, tunnels, hospitals, even palaces, but I've never played a game set aboard a giant opulent Victorian Zeppelin. I genuinely wish more of the game was set aboard the Agamemnon. The way you have to rappel down around the side of the airship to reach the staff-only areas on the underside of the cabin is the sort of spectacle these sorts of cinematic action games revel in. But this is one of the only times the Order 1886 makes good on that promise. Things do start to get a little shaky once you make your way inside.
Rules of engagement, monsieur?
Do what you must. We don't have time to distinguish between rebel conspirators and the company guards.
Wrong. Those UIC uniforms Grayson and Igraine found back in the hospital didn't have patches on their shoulders, which is also, incidentally, how you determine which of the guards in the ballroom are company men and which are rebel plants. So there's actually a very easy way to tell which people aboard the airship are your enemies. You're just being lazy. This guy's just doing his job, and Grayson brutalizes him because he can't be fucked to check his shoulder for a patch.
Who's the old man you were talking to on Mayfair and Whitechapel?
The old man. It's a long story. One that I will share with you when the time is right.
Oh, you can barely tell Percival's going to be dead by the end of the chapter. Anyway, all that aside, just to look at this place. It's gorgeous. I want to escape out of bounds and look through each and every area. It's so cool. Your first stop is the cockpit, so you can commandeer the airship and steer it back toward London. Oops. And then it's on to the ballroom. You don't encounter a single rebel on the journey, by the way. Every one of these deaths is an innocent company man. You find Hastings, but also Sir Lucan, which somehow comes as a shock to everyone, despite the fact Percival knew he would be aboard given he overheard their earlier conversation in Chapter 2. But anyway, you sneak upstairs and set up a sniper's nest to investigate the guards around the ballroom. Oh, so now you have time to sort the rebels from the company men? But the strangest thing about this scene is no one notices him up there. How? Things get dicey for a bit, the rebels set a bomb off in the engines, and eventually you regroup with everyone at the lifeboats. I really love the design of the life balloons, how they roll down little rails before dropping off the side of the ship. Very fun. You even get to launch one yourself to send Hastings and Lucan on their way. There's quite a bit of dialogue here, but none of it matters. Lucan basically says, "What the fuck?" And then you just leave with Percival because we've had one rebel bomb, yes, but what about second rebel bomb? It devolves into more fighting pretty quickly, but I do want to highlight this moment before the combat resumes as you raid the airship's armory.
All gentry are away. Repeat, all gentry are away. Company personnel to report to the remaining lifeboats. Kitchen and support staff. Stay well clear.
Company rats fleeing their sinking ship. Cowards.
You can even find an audio log of the evacuation procedures that spell it out more explicitly.
The class prioritized order for evacuation will be broadcast via the ship-wide loudspeakers. Under no circumstance should you depart the vessel until you have received the clearly stated directive that company personnel are approved for evacuation. Any personnel in violation of this mandate will face immediate disciplinary action up to and including summary execution.
In a game with better writing, this little moment of social commentary would land really well. A luxurious corporate airship abandoning its general staff to die in the event of a crash landing does sound like the sort of thing that could happen, but Percival's reaction just poisons it. He and Grayson have been no better all game, or even this specific chapter. This is why I think the undercurrent of classism in the Order 1886 was unintentional on the part of the developers, because the game does understand and draw attention to the disgusting inequalities of the Victorian era from time to time, without ever realising that the protagonists are not only beneficiaries of it, but willing participants. Why is it fine for Galahad to slit this guy's throat, but it's evil for the United India Company to abandon its own workers? It's so fucking tone-deaf, to the point I can't tell if this was just a botched attempt at a, oh, we're actually the villains kind of character arc, or it really is just that unaware of what it's saying. And after this moment, it's right back to killing povos as you race to find the rebel bomb. At least the environment looks nice. Grayson and Percival corner the rebel demo man on this gantry under the cabin, and after mowing down an army of his mates, this is the guy they try to talk to.
Listen to me, lad. Stand down.
You have no idea who you're dealing with. We are not the enemy!
Then prove it! Stop this madness.
No. Not as long as the company is allowed to carry on unobstructed.
They won't. We'll see to it.
It's too late.
Sebastian? Friend. You don't have to do this.
You don't get to see the Agamemnon crash. Boo. But you do see the consequences. Grayson wakes up amongst the wreckage, scattered about the flaming ruins of the Crystal Palace exhibition hall, which caught the Agamemnon when it fell out of the sky. A newspaper you can find later in the game reveals the crash caused over 200 casualties, but the only one Grayson cares about is Percival. He's dead. Killed in the crash. Honestly, good riddance. The guy was a monster. But it's still a moment of tragedy because, unfortunately, the good part of the Order 1886 died with him. Chapter 5.
I can show you things you've never seen before.
Alright, so we're what, a third of the way through the game more or less? I genuinely don't understand what's going on. I know there's an order based on the Knights of the Round Table, I know there's a rebellion in Whitechapel, I know somehow werewolves, Jack the Ripper and a mysterious stranger are involved, but I don't know how any of these pieces fit together. I don't know what we're fighting for, I barely know what we're fighting against, it's just really unclear what the story of the Order 1886 even is. I feel like I know as much now as I did when the game was first revealed to the world at E3 2013. I think one of the myriad reasons the Order 1886 failed so catastrophically was Sony's extremely aggressive marketing campaign that saw hype climbing into the clouds across the roughly 18 months between the game's reveal and its release. They pushed this shit hard, but going back to it all now, I'm shocked at how little they were able to hide the game's problems. All the elements are there right from the initial teaser. Galahad, Percival, Igraine, Lafayette, the Zeppelins, the werewolves, the steampunk weapons, the Arthurian influence, Whitechapel. But what is it actually saying about the game? Is it single player or multiplayer? 2013 was still well within the era of the co-op campaign. It could have gone either way. What's the genre? Is it a shooter? Is it a squad-based tactics game? The boast that the trailer was rendered in-engine is impressive, especially for the time, but it means nothing nothing when comparing the actual content of the thing with its pre-rendered peers. It's so vague, and yet that's actually a pretty good representation of the final product. The teaser almost feels purpose-made to raise questions, to get the conversation going about what the hell the game even is, to imply that it'll cater to your tastes, whatever they happen to be. And I remember watching it at the time with a sense of caution. Even back in 2013, there was something off about it, a hollowness yawning in the black bars bordering the image that suggested there was actually nothing of substance to be found under the glossy surface. Which isn't to say I didn't get caught up in the swell of hype. I was as curious as anyone when it returned to E3 in 2014 with an actual demonstration of gameplay, but at first glance, it just seemed kind of confused. But at the time, I wasn't aware Ready at Dawn were also coming off a couple of very successful God of War prequels for the PSP. They'd proven they could make cinematic action games and were coming into the order with a lot of goodwill, so naturally, people were excited, even if they weren't really sure what they were excited about. An interview by PlayStation Blog with Ru Weerasuriya later that month didn't really clear things up either. Quote, PlayStation Blog, "So, exactly what kind of game is The Order 1886? Ru Weerasuriya, The Order is a third-person action-adventure with shooting mechanics. It's very much story-based. It's a linear story-based game. We're trying to tell a story. It's what we call a filmic experience." End quote. Well, he's not wrong. They are certainly trying to tell a story. More interesting to me is Weerasuriya's use of the term filmic experience. It explains so much, not least of all why he spends the rest of the interview talking about anything but mechanics. Quote, PSB, what aspect of the game do you think will make gamers say, whoa, that's new, I've never seen that before? RW, there are gameplay features we'll be talking about that will be very, very cool. Right now we're playing with things. The moment-to-moment gameplay is really not what you might expect. We didn't want to make it single tone, where you rely on one single thing in expense of the rest. The overall feel, the filmic experience, the one thing we brought to this is something people are accustomed to but usually can't tell. When you watch a movie, you don't question what lens is being used. You don't question why there is grain on the film or why there's a certain lighting. Those are things we've been accustomed to seeing for 30 years. So when it's missing, we usually go, wait, something is wrong with this image. Games have a tendency sometimes to be too clean and crisp. We thrive in the dirt. We just love the fact that it feels dirty. It's filmed in a very realistic way. End quote. And there it is. The crux of the problem laid bare less than a month after The Order 1886 was announced. Ready at Dawn were more interested in making a film than a video game. They even hired Kirk Ellis, a writer for television best known for the HBO series John Adams, to pen The Order's script. Quote, he's not a game guy, and I think everybody would have expected us to go with a game script writer. My only request was, I cannot have a game person be there. We can bring the game side of it. I want him to bring something completely fresh. Something we might miss. End quote. Now, reading that, I can't help but feel a slight sense of deja vu. I'm sure I've read this exact same story before about another game that was considered a spectacular failure at release, but my memory isn't what it used to be. I guess we'll never know. I wasn't the only one to feel The Order 1886 seemed a bit empty at first glance. When the gaming press finally got their hands on early builds, they discovered it was as shallow as it appeared to be. IGN's Marty Silver had this to say about a demo played at PAX in 2014. Quote, I couldn't help but compare my progression to an early 70s Disneyland attraction. Enemies would pop in and out of cover, but exhibited the lack of self-awareness and sense of self-preservation of an animatronic. The feedback I received from a direct hit didn't feel empowering, but rather like when your laser sight would get close enough to a node in a shooting gallery. End quote. Carolyn Petit, writing for GameSpot, was even more blunt in an earlier article from February of that year. Quote, when The Order 1886 is ultimately released, history may not remember its early showing at last week's event, because there was so little to it that it didn't leave much of an impression. The gameplay never built up any momentum, and I was left left with no real sense of how the finished game will actually play, or what the balance between gameplay and story will be. It's not that I came away feeling like what I saw reflected poorly on the Order, so much as I felt like there wasn't enough there for me to get much of a sense of the Order at all, end quote. Which is probably why so many of Sony's marketing featurettes focus on Ready at Dawn's purpose-built engine, and the visuals. And yes, it looks incredible, even today, but good graphics do not a game make, any more than the right camera lens can make a good film. And speaking of film...
Cinema. Cinematic film. Movie theater. Cinematic film.
One thing I thought I'd discover, was hoping I'd discover, with all these featurettes is that Ready at Dawn had actually written a lot of lore and backstory for the Order 1886, which simply didn't make it into the game for whatever reason. Anything to give some context to what's going on, but there just isn't. It is exactly as shallow as it appears to be, as I felt it was 13 years ago. The videos appear to be gone now, but articles written for other sites point to a series of interviews with Weera Saria conducted by Game Informer in November 2013 about the origins of the Order 1886, how Ready at Dawn waited years for the hardware to catch up with their ambitions for the game, but also how it underwent many changes before it even started development. It was originally set during the Crusades until Assassin's Creed happened. It was originally titled Requiem, an even blander name than the Order 1886, and that's really it as far as lore goes, that I was able to find anyway. Between the puff pieces about how the Order 1886 isn't a werewolf game, not exactly inaccurate, and the roster of disappointing steampunk weapons, the gaming press also pounced on everything Ready at Dawn said the Order 1886 wouldn't be. Quote, "No multiplayer," said studio founder Andrea Pacino when asked on Twitter. "It is a single-player, third-person action-adventure game." Following reactions from fans, both positive and negative, Pacino added that it is better to do one thing well than a whole bunch half-assed, end quote. Quote, "It was already known that the Order would run at 30 frames per second with a widescreen movie-style aspect ratio of 2.4 to 1, but in a new interview with Kotaku, director Dana Jan explained exactly how Ready at Dawn arrived at its choice of frame rate. 60 frames per second is really responsive and really cool. I enjoy playing games in 60 FPS, Jan said, but one thing that really changes is the aesthetic of the game in 60 FPS. We're going for this filmic look, so one thing that we knew immediately was films run at 24 frames per second. We're gonna run at 30 because 24 FPS does not feel good to play, so there's one concession in terms of making it aesthetically pleasing, because it just has to feel good to play, end quote. Ready at Dawn were also adamant that the Order 1886 wouldn't be a single game. Quote, "We have other games in mind, other things that could be done," Weera Saria said. "The reality is that we never build a world with the mindset of, there is one story and that is it. We build a world purely for the purpose of making more than one game. It takes too much work for this to be a single title," end quote. However, in that same interview, Weera Saria noted, quote, "In order to do that, we have to pour so much energy not into the story came afterwards, but the lore, all of that had to exist first and foremost," end quote. Except there is no lore. Going through all the promotional material again, I was shocked at how much they leaned on the relatively combat-heavy sections in chapters 3 and 4 for trailers and press demos, because that's really all they had. There's nothing of substance under the surface, whether we're talking plot or mechanics, which the gaming press noted time and again all throughout 2014. And so I'm left with yet another question. Was I wrong? Did the Order 1886 really have a hype train to rival Trespasser or Cyberpunk 2077? Or was Sony's marketing just so aggressive that it merely seemed popular by virtue of overexposure? I genuinely don't know anymore. It's impossible to convey just how smothering this game's presence was at the time, but I've got to ask, was anyone actually looking forward to it? Chapter 6. Such was the Queen of Jancy. Sir Percival is dead, long live Sir Percival. Lafayette is made an ordained Knight of the Order, and then the Lord Chancellor goes off, just ripping into Grayson and the others. Don't care, didn't ask, get ratioed, plus you're bald.
The late Sebastian Mallory did not perish in the fight against the Half-Breeds. No. He died a victim of his own heedless enterprise and the negligence of those sworn to uphold the highest standards of duty and sacrifice. And to what purpose?
Lord Chancellor, I must have...
Public buildings destroyed. Innocent citizens placed at risk. Incalculable damage done to United India Company property.
Incalculable! I'm gonna start saying it like that now.
It is only by the mercy of Providence that an even greater disaster was avoided. All this while not a single rebel was taken into custody.
Wrong. We saw one getting taken away by the Bobbies back at the end of Chapter 3. Anyway, Lucan tries to defend our awesome foursome, but the Lord Chancellor doesn't want to hear it.
Sir Percival's force did uncover evidence of a rebel effort against the...
Circumstantial evidence. Mere supposition, all of which resulted in a deplorable calamity. I will hear no more of the matter.
With respect, Lord Chancellor.
Sit down, Sir Galahad!
Did he forget about the rebellion? The rebellion he mentioned in an earlier scene? The rebellion that attacks Westminster Bridge literally seconds later? Am I going insane? Anyway, the rebels have already turned Westminster Bridge into a battlefield by the time you arrive. They're gunning for Lord Hastings. Again. But I feel like they could have chosen a better spot for the ambush than right beside the Order's headquarters. Maybe that's just me. You find him pretty quick, and also the rebel leader from Whitechapel watching from afar, which sends Grayson into a rage.
Gray, where are you going?
To finish what we started.
This is no time for vengeance! Come to your senses! Gray, stop!
I get the sense the developers intended Percival's death to harden Grayson a bit, to numb him against the plight of the rebels and turn him into punished Galahad, but honestly, how is this any different to the way he's been acting all game? Our protagonists have taken turns passing around the stick of common sense, pointing out how they probably shouldn't be murdering their way through every situation they come across, but they've all gleefully tossed it aside the second the fighting started too.
Fuck the army. This is my fight.
As a plot beat, the Battle of Westminster Bridge is pretty crap, but as a combat encounter, it's functional at least. It keeps things moving and doesn't get bogged down in set pieces or quicktime events, at least until you get your hands on this cannon, and then Grayson catches up with the rebel lieutenant.
Where's the Indian woman? Where is she? Where is she? Where? Tell me! Tell me! Whitechapel. Brothel.
Putting aside the fact Ready at Dawn showed their hand a little too much with that scene regarding their influences.
Where are they? Where? Where are they? Tell me!
I wanted to let it play in full because it's yet another example of how ugly the Order 1886 is under the surface. The disconnect between plot and mechanics in games used to be so common that it even got its own term, ludonarrative dissonance, and up to now, so many of the Order's grottiest elements could be chalked up to that same decoherence. If you're going to make a game with combat, by necessity, it will need combat encounters, and that requires someone be there for the player to shoot. It's a failure of the game's writers that they chose the working class as that someone in this case, but I think it wouldn't be as disgusting if the Order's hatred of the pause was limited to gameplay alone. The Order 1886 doesn't suffer from ludonarrative dissonance the way you could claim the Uncharted games do, because both story and mechanics are in lockstep regarding their contempt for the enemies you fight, intentionally or not. I would argue this is the most violent moment in the game because it sheds the suspension of disbelief offered by the sci-fi weaponry and supernatural monsters to show you something real. That same heft to the motion capture performances that made the boss battle with the werewolves so much fun gives each strike here a sense of naturalistic weight that felt too uncomfortable for me. This is not a triumphant moment. The rebel isn't laughing defiantly in Grayson's face the way the Joker did to Batman. This is just violence for its own sake. Yes, they're still enemies, but the rebel has clearly surrendered and is also unarmed. There's no need for this level of brutality on Grayson's part. I get what the game is trying to do with this scene, painting it as Grayson's lowest moment, but it takes him so low that there's simply no way for him to climb back up. He continues his rampage all the way back to the Whitechapel brothel, where he finally meets the leader of the rebellion, Devi.
Death always follows in your path.
And yours will be next if you don't give me what I need.
I don't respond well to threats.
Then you're of no use to me.
Do your worst.
Oh my fucking god, just kiss already. So, plot twist, Devi doesn't actually lead the rebellion. It's Lakshmi who really runs the show, a real-life Indian queen who fought the British in the 1850s. Which means, and I cannot fucking believe this, that the only immediately sympathetic rebel you meet in the whole game is yet another fucking aristocrat. Well, yes, of course Grayson would listen to her, she's royalty after all. Not that she has much to actually say. Lakshmi spends all her screen time either getting captured or spouting cryptic bullshit like,
"You've all been betrayed."
Betrayed? By whom?
The men you call masters.
Tell me why I should not kill you!
There are things worse than Death Knight. Much worse.
She claims the United India Company is up to no good, and that Lord Hastings is keeping secrets from the Order, but Grayson wants proof, so she agrees to show him some.
Be prepared to meet heavy resistance from the United India Guards.
Until I say otherwise, we will not harm innocent men.
No. Let it go. This video is long enough as it is. Grayson also starts taking off his clothes because...
The Order cannot be seen as having any part of this.
Which I get, but also this man is a public figure. The Order isn't a secret society, they pop up in the broadsheets almost every day. People would know Grayson's face, especially those who work for the United India Company, which, as Lakshmi points out, often works closely with the Order. And it's a moot point anyway, because literally seconds after he and Lakshmi leave the building, Igraine shows up and not only sees them together, but immediately finds the armor he left behind the bar inside the brothel, making it look like he's in league with the rebels before he's even killed a single dock worker. Chapter 9 takes you across Blackwall Yard, through courtyards and warehouses, a ship in dry dock, and, naturally, some underground tunnels. That is a nice train though.
Don't worry, he's only resting.
Yeah, with a lifelong debilitating brain injury, the sunrise actually injects some colour into the grey streets of the dockyard. This part of the game is very beautiful, but you're not really given the chance to admire it. You literally don't make it through the gate into the UIC docks before you're caught, and then it's like an hour of not killing innocent men, Uncharted-style companion puzzles, and getting jumped by enemies even when they're not even actively looking for you. Devi shows up for like a second, mostly just to let the player know who the rebels' man on the inside is. Nicola, you sly dog. How is the writing in this game sometimes really good? I don't get it. Anyway, bye Devi. The chapter ends in a warehouse, and out of everything in The Order 1886, this was the moment I was most curious to revisit, because it's the moment I remembered most vividly from my original playthrough.
Look, Hard Knight. See the evil we both fight against.
Vampires. It can't be. How?
The half-breeds are consolidating their power. With the protection of the Lycans in your land, Hastings and his vampire ilk are spreading disease throughout your
Lord Hastings, he can't be one of them.
Many have witnessed in Whitechapel your noble lord roaming the streets late at night, preying on downtrodden women.
The Ripper gangs.
That is what you call them. How do you think the murderer still continues to evade Commissioner Doyle's dragnet? Whitechapel has become the Kindred's feeding ground.
And I remember it so clearly because it's such a bizarre reveal. What do you mean there are vampires now? What do you mean there's a warehouse full of them? This isn't the first time they've appeared. A dead one showed up back in Chapter 4, but it's certainly the first time they've been mentioned. Grayson didn't say shit when he saw the corpse back in the hospital. I figured it was just a weird mutant werewolf. The reveal that the term half-breeds refers to multiple supernatural creatures rather than werewolves alone is a swerve too, because up until now, now, they've been the only monster to factor into things. And why are the werewolves and vampires working together? Furthermore, why is the United India Company exporting vampires to America? Because that is the plan. They're the cargo the Agamemnon was carrying that brought on the rebel attack to begin with. Hell, why did they bother to attack the Agamemnon at all when Lord Hastings goes hunting as Jack the Ripper in Whitechapel, their home ground, where they could just set up a trap and kill him with all the Order weaponry Tesla's been smuggling to them? I have so many questions, and I was hoping coming back to the game would answer them, since I didn't go out of my way to find the collectibles back at release. But no, this recent playthrough's just raised more. I think the strangest aspect of this whole scene is how understated it is. This feels like it should be a big reveal, that it should raise the stakes or recontextualize everything that's come before, but it doesn't. It just passes by, and then it's never really brought up again. Your next objective is to burn the warehouse down, by which I mean Lakshmi burns the warehouse down while Grayson and the player stand around playing with a lighter, but the vampires never burst out to defend themselves. When more enemies do show up, they're just men. Normal men. And when they're all dead, some Lycans show up too. But you don't fight a single vampire here. In fact, you don't fight a single vampire in The Order 1886 at all. Chapter 7.
This is the only way.
Among the game's many faults, one shining light is the audio visuals. I didn't find much explanation about the setting of the game in all those developer featurettes that Sony pumped out, but I did learn about the lengths Ready at Dawn went to in order to get it looking good. They spoke about taking trips out to London to get the layered histories of the architecture right.
We went to London with 20 people, location scouting and shooting extensive amounts of photos.
If you hadn't been there, you have to go there to understand what life is like, what it feels like to walk in the streets, because a lot of it still exists.
There's so much history. You can kind of see the layers of time and the layers of architecture built on top of each other, even at that time.
They talked about programming imperfections into the camera to give it a more dynamic cinematic quality.
So if something kind of happens out of the peripheral vision, we want to build in to the camera a sense of personality, so the cameraman actually has a delay in reacting to it.
They went into detail about scanning textiles to get the look and feel of certain fabrics right.
And so that was actually kind of challenging, is finding those materials in today's societies, because we have a lot of synthetic materials now.
Using a 3D scanning process, we took reams and reams of these kind of historically accurate textiles and digitized them down to sub-millimeter precision, which just has all the imperfections and also artistry that is really hard to kind of simulate from scratch.
Whether it's smoke, things blowing in the wind, everything that is moving in the game interacts volumetrically and correctly with the air in the environment. When our characters are standing there and the wind is blowing and you get the coat flapping in a physically correct manner, whether you even understand why it looks better than you've seen before, it just registers. The player doesn't know why, but it looks better, it looks more realistic.
Even the Lycans were approached through the lens of realism.
You don't want something to look like a man in a suit. You don't want something to just have weird kind of bones jutting out of it just because that looks cool or scary.
Also trying to retain a sense of the person. We didn't want this magical transformation from specific guy to generic scary creature. We wanted a sense of who that person was, still kind of transferred into the Lycan anatomy.
Their description of the mechanics of werewolf transformations was actually really cool too.
The big toes of the humans actually morphs and migrates back to the dew claw.
And all that effort paid off. Visuals tend to be the first thing to age when it comes to video games. It's why strong art direction can give certain titles a timeless quality, but I've never seen one aiming for photorealism stay photorealistic for so long after release. The Order 1886 is still one of the best looking games ever made. The last 11 years haven't muddied its visuals one bit, despite it aiming for complete realism, which was a very intentional decision on Ready at Dawn's part.
It was very tempting and very easy early on to go, like, if we're gonna do alternate history, let's alter the world a lot.
The risk of approaching a game like this and bringing that balance between fiction and non-fiction, once you've basically, broken that suspension of disbelief, there is no, buying it back from the player.
That kind of undermined the reality and the believability of the situations and the characters, and then it was kind of like all bets are off.
We didn't want everything to be kind of pushed
into alternate history. So more often than not, modes of transportation is the same, like horse-drawn carriages.
And they stuck to it, even when they knew it would hurt the players.
It wouldn't make sense to do the typical video game, busty, curvy woman, and especially it wouldn't be accurate to the time. I mean, if you looked at the dresses, I mean, they barely had an ounce of skin showing, so we really had to be more creative with her design.
That's right. The Order 1886 confirmed woke bullshit.
You think we'll get to shoot a few of them rich folk?
He used a pronoun. Get him, Grayson! Just to look at the way the light scatters on cloth or wood, how sunlight catches the clouds, how they modelled nose hair for the Lord Chancellor, how Grayson's boots dimple the cloth of the Agamemnon's envelope. It's gorgeous, and I mean that. But that fidelity came at a couple of almost unforgivable costs, locking the frame rate to 30 frames per second, and the 2 black bars bordering the screen. The stated reason for these costs was to give the game a more cinematic feel, and given how Andrea Pacino has stuck to his guns about that years after release, I have no choice but to believe it. I feel like he would have cracked by now if it was just a technical limitation as so many at the time accused. But let's not kid ourselves either, it certainly didn't hurt. The PS4 already sounds like it's about to start taxiing down the runway to take off at the best of times. Having to render the Order across the whole screen would probably set it on fire. I remember it being a deeply unpopular decision at the time, too. It was the dawn of a new console generation. Surely the hardware was boss enough. That's apparently something we said back then, fucking hell.
Maybe on PCs if you had a really boss video card.
To make use of the whole screen, to run the game at 60 frames per second.
The things they're saying are damage control.
They've said some really dumb things in the past.
Yeah.
Like, they justified the 30 FPS beyond what they should have done, which is to say the PS4 isn't powerful enough to actually let us put the graphics out that we want at 60. They justified the fucking black bars. My cinematic vision! No, you did that because that's 25% less pixels to render. Like, don't bullshit me. I can do basic mathematics.
And I'll be honest, I still don't like the black bars myself, which is entirely on me because I have no issue when retro survival horror games limit the aspect ratio to 4:3 for similar artistic reasons. And honestly, they're not too bad when the game is trying to be a movie, but they make the combat encounters a real slog. Not being able to see to the sides very well makes it easy for enemies to sneak up on you, on the rare occasions when they do actually bother to charge your position. There's a weird blur effect that appears during combat too, like the camera's not focused correctly, and that's part of the problem with aiming for photorealism. When the illusion cracks, it fucking cracks. This woman's shawl is possessed. The brothel's doorman is invisible sometimes. One of the UIC guards at Blackwall Yard not only got stuck out of bounds inside a warehouse, but was rendered invincible as a result. This gun clipped through the wall of the ship in dry dock. I somehow knocked all these pots and pans off a counter while not killing innocent serving staff aboard the Agamemnon, but nothing spilled across the floor. I suppose it's a bit unreasonable to expect that level of quality. There has to be a limit somewhere, but when you're selling the game largely on the realism of its environments, then these issues do stand out. The audio quality is really good too, though in a less obvious way. The game gave them some absolutely shocking material to perform, but the cast all do their best to make it work. I didn't even realise Percival was played by Graham McTavish until his name popped up in the credits, though Yuri Lowenfall's impossible to miss as Tesla.
Thomas and I are not on speaking terms. The man is an idiot!
The music's fine, I guess. I'm not a Jason Graves guy, so I didn't find much to like about it.
Son of a whore. There.
The main theme is good at least. Where the Order 1886 really excels audibly is in the ambience, the seabirds calling over the docks, the crackle in the radio and the pitter-patter of boots against the cobbles.
It's the same here.
It doesn't jump out at you. All the Foley work is very subtle, but that's what makes it believable, what helps sell the massive explosions and shattering glass and chunky crunch of steel cutting through bone.
I'm shot down! Grenade!
Unfortunately, I do think the weapons sound a little dull. They just don't have the power you'd expect for guns capable of blowing a man to bits. The falchion sounds a little flaccid. The arc lance sounds like something out of Destroy All Humans. And the thermite rifle can sound powerful, but never when you're wielding it.
Pinning us down! Rebel neutralized!
We need to take their thermite position out!
It was the more ordinary guns that gave the best audio feedback, like this rifle that inexplicably does the M1 Garand ding when you reload.
I'm shot down! Grenade!
However, if you ever stop to enjoy the ambience, it instantly breaks. If you actually pause to listen to the fine upstanding citizens of London as you make your way to Mayfair in Chapter 1, the second they run out of dialogue, they'll just stand there awkwardly like they're characters in a theme park attraction waiting for you to move on. The same happens if you pause to admire the council chamber set in Chapter 2. The Lord Chancellor and Igraine will have their conversation, stand in silence for a few seconds, and then start the whole interaction again. There was a moment in Chapter 9 when I climbed up onto a roof to get a better look at the sunrise and was genuinely struck by the beauty of it. The golden sunlight staining the clouds pink, birds wheeling above the Thames as a sailing ship slowly made its lazy way down the river, the pollution rising from the smokestacks beyond the buildings on the distant shore. It looked like a painting, like it deserved to take up the wall of an art museum, without any need for the game's more fantastical elements like a zeppelin or a mooring tower or a werewolf, and it was completely ruined by Lakshmi yelling at Grayson to hurry up the whole fucking time.
This way, hurry, this way, hurry, this way, hurry.
The Order 1886 may be gorgeous to look at, but it does not want you to linger. It does not want the player to go off script and shatter the illusion that they're watching a film rather than playing a game. When wandering beyond the confines of the camera to take a closer look at the sets is one of the greatest joys of the medium. The Order 1886 wants you moving at all times, probably because if you ever do stop, you'll start thinking about how absolutely none of this makes any sense. Chapter 8. From Hell. Upon returning to Westminster, Grayson goes straight to the Lord Chancellor, who doesn't believe a word of the allegations because the idiot didn't bother to grab any evidence while burning down a warehouse full of evidence.
This allegation is monstrous!
I refuse to believe it. If the Lord Chancellor will permit me, I will not permit!
So Grayson goes to his oldest and most trusted ally, a person who has supported him through thick and thin all game, who is willing to give him the benefit of the doubt even when things seem sketchy, who is only looking out for his safety. Sir Lucan.
Now what do you think? I have no opinion.
In fact, he pushes Igraine away when she confronts him about his little trip to the Whitechapel brothel right before this meeting.
Whatever it is, for God's sake, tell me.
Not this time, Izzy. And you do well to stay clear of me. For your own good.
This despite the fact she's willing to hear him out over what she saw, when she's technically covering for him already by not telling the rest of the Order about seeing him with Lakshmi, even if it is in the middle of a public space right in front of a pair of beef-eaters. But no, he chooses Lucan, a man who has almost exclusively appeared in the company of Lord Hastings. They were seen talking after the council meeting in Chapter 2, and they were practically joined at the hip aboard the Agamemnon. Look at Lucan's reaction to Lord Hastings pushing the council into a vote on attacking Whitechapel. And let's not forget his name is one squiggly line away from the word Lycan, not even a full letter, just one extra stroke of the pen. Gee, I wonder who the traitor could be. Grayson is too much of an idiot to see it though. He suggests they sneak into the United India House at night to grab some evidence of Hastings' wrongdoing.
Trespass on the company's headquarters. You are cut from the same cloth as Mallory?
Drastic circumstances call for drastic measures.
Like, imagine being in Lucan's shoes here. This complete meathead somehow uncovers your evil plan in spite of his missing brain cells, and then immediately offers to walk himself into a trap with your help specifically because you're familiar with the tripwire.
I would have your assistance, Alistair.
I hardly think it proper for the Knight Commander to be seen...
You know the lay of the land. I will need your guidance to navigate the grounds of the United India House.
You'd be biting your tongue to stop yourself from smiling. Lucan even tries to rope Igraine and Lafayette into it too, clear out Percival's team in one fell swoop, but Grayson does him one better by going to the rebels instead. How can one man be such a dumbass? So, off they go killing again.
Grayson, I think it unwise to eliminate company guards until we have proof.
There is no time, Alistair.
The infiltration of the United India House is another mandated stealth section where being seen equals a bullet to the head. It's much lengthier than the journey through the Agamemnon though, taking you through multiple wings of the garden to reach your goal. There are roughly a dozen guards wandering the grounds, but the game only gives you 5 bolts for the crossbow to deal with them, unless you find an extra bundle hidden away in a side room with a collectible. In the moment this left me annoyed, same as Lucan shoving me out of cover in a later firefight, but thinking back on it, these things actually serve the story really well. Lucan is trying to get Grayson caught or killed, but that doesn't do the player any favours along the way. Wait, these guys don't have shoulder patches either. What's worse, that we're still accidentally killing rebels masquerading as UIC guards? Already at dawn just fucked up despite their otherwise meticulous attention to detail. Okay, that guy had a patch. You can't even let them live either, since you need a key to get through the next area hidden on one of the guards. And let me tell you, they don't make it easy. And naturally, this forced stealth section ends with Lakshmi immediately getting caught by UIC guards.
Back away! Back
What do you do if you have no ammo here? Do you just lose?
My gallant knight.
It seems I came just in time.
I suppose so. Though it would not be in my nature to let a god get the better of me.
Lakshmi. Queen. Come on. She's come with Devi, who is immediately sent away as per usual.
I need you to stay.
Rani, I need to be by your side.
Do you not know how dear you are to me?
Then why do you push me away?
And Finley, who shockingly has appeared before. It took going through the recordings again to notice, but he has a blink and you'll miss it cameo with Devi back in Chapter 3 when Grayson and Lafayette were caught at the Whitechapel rally. He might also be the poor guy Grayson bashed on Westminster Bridge, but I'm pretty sure they're just wearing the same clothes. If it is the same guy though, that's pretty fucked up. Anyway, after all that effort to infiltrate the United India House undetected, you're immediately caught, and it's straight back to cover shooting all the way to your destination. Eventually you do reach the archives, where you find a nice juicy pile of fucking nothing to implicate the UIC in their vampire smuggling operation. You do find an audio log from a friend of Percival's, who I thought might offer you the identity of the mysterious stranger, but given he gets dragged off to the gulag at the end, he's probably just another corpse, and it doesn't say anything of substance anyway.
He will find what he seeks inside. Hey, what are you doing here? Wait! No! Emma! Emma!
It's eventually Lakshmi who finds what you're after, a shipment log indicating the UIC will be sending the RMS Oceanic to the United States in 6 weeks. Plenty of time to drop in on the cargo hold and catch them red-handed. But then...
Where's Finley?
In the next room, being eaten by Lord Hastings, who is, indeed, a vampire, which is treated like it's some grand revelation, but who else was it going to be?
Lord Hastings.
Do you believe me now? He is the one behind all this.
The Whitechapel killings. The half-breed scourge. United India. All you.
Jacob Van Neck. Or, as the Fleet Street pamphleteers have so fondly named me, Jack the Ripper, at your service. I thank you, Sir Lucan, for delivering these meddlers.
What? Lucan's the traitor? He's working with Hastings? I don't believe it! Who could have seen this coming? Even Hastings can't believe how easily Grayson and Lakshmi got played.
Quite fortuitous, wouldn't you say, Sir Galahad? The rebel leader captured, and a traitor revealed, all in one fell swoop. The traitor being you, regrettably.
You do land a hit on Hastings during the escape, the only hit the game offers you, but at least it's a good one. And then it's downstairs for some himbo-on-himbo combat, but it doesn't last. Igraine and Lafayette arrive just in time to get the wrong impression, and Hastings arrives just in time to get Galahad's name wrong.
Sir Galahad's accomplice was a woman.
Not doing another take on that one? Okay. On to Chapter 12, an unskippable 6-minute cutscene in which Galahad is put on trial by the Order and judged guilty of all charges.
I ask the Council to impose the supreme penalty.
Take him to Detroit.
No! No, not Detroit! No! No, please! Anything but that!
It's only Lucan who speaks in Grayson's defense, which I don't really understand. In his situation, wouldn't it be better to let Grayson fall on his own sword? Nor do I really understand why Grayson wouldn't be fighting tooth and claw to have his say. Like, there's no reason for him not to be screaming his innocence here, or calling out Lucan as a liar. Also, who the fuck is this?
Guilty.
Is that famed Knight of the Round Table, Sir Esclabor the Unknown? This scene is also notable for being Lord Hastings' final appearance in the entire game. Look, this is the very last time you ever see him.
He must stand condemned by his own actions.
And then he's just gone, the game's main villain, banished by a smash cut to black. It doesn't seem real. What's even more surprising is that the game doesn't force you to replay the prologue, because we've finally caught up to where we started. We finally understand why Grayson's in chains, and why he chooses the Thames over going back to the dungeons. At the time I gave the prologue grief for not setting anything up, but now that we've completed the loop, I understand it couldn't have, even if it wanted to. There's simply really are no stakes. There's barely any context. Shit just happens because the plot dictates it must. It's a completely hollow experience. Seeing brief glimpses of the prologue again just brings into focus how little has actually happened since then. I am just as invested now, 6 hours in, as I was when I saw Grayson take the plunge the first time, which is to say, not at all. Chapter 9.
The sentence is death.
In a now lost last-minute interview with game trailers quoted by GameSpot published on the 12th of February 2015, a week before the game's release on the 20th, Ready at Dawn's CEO Ru Wirasuriya said this of the Order 1886, quote, "It's gonna be a trial by fire," end quote. Little did he know that the fire would arrive a few days early when a full playthrough of the Order 1886 was leaked on YouTube. The reaction was immediate and explosive, and the gaming press was all too happy to fan the flames for engagement. Quote, "The footage totals roughly 5 hours of playtime, including both gameplay and cutscenes. The time devoted to cutscenes appears to be roughly half of that playtime, and the cutscenes are reported to be unskippable," end quote. Quote, "The leak follows earlier rumours that the game would be just 3 hours long, a fact that has since been disputed by Ready at Dawn's founder and CTO, Andrea Pacino. Pacino would go on to tweet that he would no longer comment on clickbait rumours," end quote. Ready at Dawn went into damage control mode, claiming the game would take 8 to 10 hours to complete for a regular playthrough, or arguing that more doesn't always equal better, as game director Dana Jan did here. Quote, "If you go and you eat a steak, if you pay $100 for a steak that tastes like the best steak you've ever had in your life, but it's only 200 grams, versus paying the same price for the worst steak you could want, but it's all you could eat, there's an argument to be made that one is better than the other depending on who you are. I'm not saying it has to be that polarizing. I'm just asking, why do we feel like we always have to measure things first and foremost in terms of quantity?" End quote. And there was a lot of talk about how the person who leaked the game was a speedrunner trying to blitz through to the end credits, though that was disputed.
And to be clear, the video that was uploaded was definitely not a speedrun. There are many moments where, like, there's one part where he's chasing a werewolf through the streets, and it jumps over a wall, and it's like, chase the werewolf! And you have to find a way to get past the wall, and he lost the werewolf like 2 times. Maybe,
right.
Like he
so
he had
didn't
to
make it
restart.
optimally at all.
No, not at all.
And also that they could have edited the footage to make it look shorter or worse than it was. But those voices fell on deaf ears. The leak popped the hype bubble before people even got the chance to play the game. Haters felt validated, supporters felt betrayed, and when professional reviews did finally start to drop on the 18th and 19th, it only confirmed what the leaked playthrough had suggested. One thing no reviewer could deny was the game looked good, but that was really the only consistent praise it got, and even then it was dragged through the mud where it visually faltered. Quote, "Though it's not especially challenging, the whole process of shooting is made more annoying by the ever-present black bars at the top and bottom of the screen. When I was behind cover, I was much more interested in being able to see what was happening in my limited vertical screen space than having a wider aspect ratio." End quote. No one seemed to enjoy the gameplay. Quote, "The Order is a barely competent third-person shooter. It repackages the cover-based shootouts of Gears of War and Uncharted without managing to capture any of the artificial intelligence quirks and level design tricks that make those games so reactive and exciting." End quote. And if you think that's bad, wait until you hear what they said about the QuickTime events. Quote, "As cinema, and seeing how much of the running time is given over to unskippable cutscenes and barely interactive QTEs, The Order positively begs to be assessed on such terms. The Order is a failure." End quote. More than one review likened it to a very late console launch title. Kyle Prahl compared it to Resistance: Fall of Man, but EGM chose Rise: Son of Rome instead, an analogy already making the rounds in the wake of the leak.
I don't know what to even make of this. Like, I just don't know what to make of it, because it seems like it's another one of those we promised the world and delivered.
It seems like Rise: Son of Rome to me, like a showpiece.
It does. Oh, it feels like it.
In fact, the Order seems to be making eye contact with Rise: Son of Rome as they both stare forlornly out through the fences of their respective death camps. They are the stuff of the spunk gargle wee modern shooter behind the thin disguise of an alternative setting.
GameSpot's review also gave The Order grief for more closely resembling a showroom tech demo. Quote, "That The Order is so in love with its own object models is almost laughable. You pick up minor knickknacks and lovingly rotate rotate them as if you have discovered the Holy Grail. Yes, this model ship is lovely, but was the self-congratulatory time pattern necessary? End quote. And I get it, but also, like, I want that fucking boat. And of course, everyone had something to say about the game's length.
First of all, let's get the big question out of the way, the one everyone wants to know. 7 hours, I think?
You played for 7 hours.
Yeah, something like that.
Out of all the common complaints, this is the only one that feels dated as of 2026 to me. A game being a 5 to 8 hour single player experience just doesn't seem to rankle people as much as it once did. That said, I was surprised to find most reviewers didn't see the short runtime as a deal breaker the way so many consumers did. It was the pacing of that runtime they took issue with.
The length of the game didn't bother me, it's how that time was used,
right.
You know?
Right. I felt like in the beginning there's some severe pacing issues. I was really confused about certain factions that are mentioned during the entire game, and then you kind of stumble upon what they are, but it's never really clear, and they should have taken more time to actually go into detail about that. I feel like if they would have repurposed their time a little better, then it would have been fine as is.
Yeah.
They tell their story, it's good as it is, but you just need to figure out what's important and what's not. Walking through a hallway, just walking, you can't run, you can't do anything.
Right.
That is a waste of time.
I don't think length of that game is its biggest problem. I don't think like the time it takes to get from start to end is the problem. I think the problem is that it takes all the interesting stuff that game does and it wedges it in the last half hour and then tells you to buy a sequel.
But what was most shocking going back to the reviews was how many seemed to like the story. Quote, "It's more accurate to say The Order 1886 is excellent original fiction atop a competent video game." End quote. Quote, "Its best aspects are its stunning looks, atmosphere, and style, which are truly fantastic, and entertaining fiction." End quote. Quote, "Easily The Order 1886's biggest strength is its narrative. While not a story you haven't heard before, it is told with confidence and skill." End quote. Kyle Prahl even praised The Order for having such anemic audio logs. A truly terrible take, best parried by Andrew Fitch when he wrote, quote, "I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of audio logs as a storytelling device, but if you're going to put them in your game, make an effort to ensure they truly augment the narrative. The Order offers just over a dozen phonograph cylinders that don't expand upon the world in any meaningful way, and it's baffling that Ready at Dawn seems so content with letting the surroundings feel so utterly barren." End quote. Indeed, Fitch wasn't the only one to be turned off by the story. GameSpot's Kevin Van Ord raked it over the coals for squandering the potential of its setting. Justin McElroy and Yahtzee also both picked up on how morally bankrupt the game's protagonists are. Like, thank God, I thought I was going insane. And absolutely no one liked the ending. Quote, "It's also clear that Ready at Dawn wanted this to become a franchise in the worst way, and as the curtain falls on The Order 1886 in cliffhanger fashion, and I use that in the most generous possible way, it becomes painfully clear that they rushed to build a shoddy foundation in a frantic chase to ultimately craft their Empire Strikes Back. But they forgot one crucial element. You need to make sure you earn the right to do that with your Star Wars moment first." End quote. Wow. That is a comparison that has not aged well. I remember the gaming press dogpiling on the game when it released, but ultimately the reaction was overwhelmingly average. It's a mediocre game that got mediocre scores, for pretty much all the same reasons I'm giving it grief in this video. The public perception was definitely a little more vitriolic even before the game limped onto the shelves. Dana Jan wasn't wrong when he said, quote, "We have this uncanny haterade for our game no matter what. People are looking for something to throw at our game, some reason to hate it." End quote. That certainly hasn't changed since 2015. Yet for all the damage the leaked playthrough did, it at least gave potential buyers an idea of what The Order 1886 even was, in a way none of the previews had. It popped the hype bubble, but it also put things in perspective. I wouldn't have bought the game if not for the discourse around that leak giving me an idea of what to expect. And I guess I wasn't the only one, because the game still sold decently in spite of its critical reception, at least until Bloodborne dropped a month later and blew The Order 1886 out of the conversation for good. Chapter 10. Drawing Blades from a Stone. You have to wonder what Grayson's plan was when he tossed himself into the Thames. All that effort to escape, just to immediately throw in the towel. It wouldn't exactly be out of character, but unfortunately the plot has other plans. He's fished out of the river by Nikola Tesla and Percival's mysterious stranger. Up close, I'm pretty sure he isn't anyone we've seen before. He may as well be Altair from Assassin's Creed given the cut of his clothes, and much like Lakshmi, all he does is speak in cryptic nonsense.
I have done what I can. It is not for me to protect him now.
If he even speaks at all, those 2 sentences are half the lines he has in the entire game, and then he just fucks off. Instead, Tesla's forced to go to Lakshmi for help, and then he too washes his hands of having to take care of Grayson. And it's hard to blame either of them, because according to Lakshmi, it takes Grayson 2 weeks to shake off his swim in the Thames, and that's with the aid of the Holy Grail's own Prime.
You've been in and out of consciousness for almost a fortnight. But come, we must make our way back to Whitechapel.
Well, of course. Where else is there to go? It's not like the Order is aware of the Rebellion's presence in Whitechapel and the brothel specifically or anything. There's no way Lafayette or Igraine will be waiting for you there. And oh look, more tunnels! Shockingly, Igraine isn't waiting in ambush at the brothel, but she's definitely on the way after stumbling onto Tesla's hidey hole right after Grayson and Lakshmi leave.
Tell every able knight to converge towards Whitechapel. God be my witness. I will see to the end of the rebellion.
And then, having achieved her final form, having gone through the only actual character arc in The Order 1886, she is banished from the game, never to be seen again. Lakshmi's ready to bug out of Whitechapel, but Grayson has other plans.
Salvage what you can and go. I have unfinished business at the palace.
Have you lost your senses?
Bold of you to assume he had any to begin with, but no, Grayson just wants to rescue Tesla, and he has to do it alone because he's such a big gruff lone wolf gamer boy. And look who's waiting for him downstairs. Wow, how did Lafayette find them so quickly? I guess we'll never know. And he's willing to give Grayson the benefit of the doubt on his alleged crimes, but he draws the line at actively helping him.
Should you threaten the cause of liberty, you can count on Lafayette to be your sworn enemy. Adieu, monsieur. Until we meet again.
That we will, my friend.
And then Lafayette, too, bids the game adieu. The stage is set for the final battle, but there's one more goodbye to make. Devi, of all people, appears to give Grayson a gun, and then she's just gone too. Thanks, game. Very cool. The last act of The Order 1886's plot is like watching a car crash in slow motion. It all breaks apart so suddenly and in such strange ways. Like, you could sense the behind-the-scenes troubles earlier in the game, but they are deafening here. You can feel the project collapsing under its own weight through all the fancy post-processing effects and underground tunnels. Yet, as the story implodes, the gameplay inexplicably becomes quite good. You may still be fighting the same guys through yet more underground tunnels, but as with Fear back in 2005, the samey modular environments allowed the designers to craft combat encounters that play to mechanical strengths rather than story verisimilitude, and the climactic difficulty level let them throw every type of enemy at the player at once. The Beefeaters come at you in greater numbers than the Rebels or UIC guards, and in greater variety too. The shotgun specialists are joined by heavies wielding thermite rifles and detonators, which force you to keep moving between points of cover to avoid getting blown up. They may not be any more aggressive from a purely mechanical perspective than they were before, but in terms of player feedback, it feels like trying to repel a properly trained, properly armed force of elite soldiers. It took the whole game, but The Order 1886 does deliver on its cover-based shooting. It just sucks that it comes so late. The game is finally starting to feel like itself, right before the end credits. Things were apparently so bad behind the scenes that you barely get stopped dead in your tracks by a minigame. There have been a couple of common ones throughout, a lock-picking minigame where you have to spin the tumblers up and down, and a hacking minigame where you have to snare two bouncing balls with a press of the analog stick. 1886, and honestly, as far as minigames go, they're fine. They're not too intrusive, they'd probably fit really well into combat given their simplicity. Like, imagine trying to overload a rail track switch to divert a steam engine into an oncoming horde of Lycans or something similar, but they only ever appear in moments of calm, and the vast majority are just to unlock a door to the next area. The most interesting minigame, I think, is when you need to signal an airship with Morse code using the PS4 controller's touchpad. Again, the sequence is simple enough that it could be integrated into combat fairly easily from an encounter design standpoint, but it's only ever used once back in Chapter 3. I'm not surprised a lot of people considered them gimmicky busywork back at release, because they kind of are, honestly, though at least they offer more interaction than the sections where you're asked to do nothing but walk around. Gorgeous though the game is, there's a difference between getting to briefly explore a harbour master's office or the interior of a giant opulent airship, and being forced to wander the same underground tunnels again and again and again. Some pretty good combat encounters aside, it's honestly really telling just how much of the game's final act is nothing but these same boring transitory areas, like you're being funneled down a loading zone to nowhere. This whole video I've been fighting to keep on top of this monster of a story, and now it's withered so suddenly that I find myself with room to spare on discussing the non-combat gameplay mechanics, of which there are very few. You can look at stuff, that's cool, but what does it add to the experience? Perhaps predictably, Grayson's rescue mission jumps the rails the moment Tesla seems within reach.
Nicola, just the man I wanted to see.
Oh, how may I help you, Sir Lucan?
Come with me. We have much to discuss.
Yeah, like what the hell is even going on? Chapter 11.
I have yet to understand why all this has happened.
As the Order 1886 enters its post-Backlash revival era, I've seen a few articles single out one aspect in particular as worth returning to: the setting. Quote, "The Order 1886 is the kind of AAA game we need right now. Skimming through the lore as I write this, I'm immediately taken back to 2015 when I saw the potential for something spectacular to come from the Order," end quote. And on the surface, I agree, because at first glance it is a really cool world, a fun mix of futuristic tech and ancient myth with a few werewolves thrown in. Modern hyper-fantastical reinterpretations of Arthurian legend have really blossomed in video games as of late, but I like Ready at Dawn's grounded take on the idea. I love their massive bird bath of a holy grail, and the extremely out-of-place throne of carved stone in amongst the opulent splendour of the Victorian era, and the fact the Order is a public organisation rather than a secret society. The idea that the original Knights passed on their names to their successors the way nobles assume lordly titles or superheroes hand down their personas is an interesting blend of old and new too. Only the Lord Chancellor is an original member of Arthur's Round Table, though I don't think we ever learn which of the knights he is. I bet it's Lancelot. He looks like a Lancelot. And this world having need of immortal super soldier knights to protect them from supernatural threats is a good reason for them to remain prominent up to the 1800s. It's a good starting point, but the game never bothers to build anything interesting out of it. We don't learn any of the Order's history, other than King Arthur was involved at some point, and most of the original members are dead. There are little gestures toward a deeper history, like every so often the characters will mention the fact they're centuries old.
Crossbow. Brings back memories. Ancient ones at that.
But they rarely act like it. Percival might be related to famous 15th century Arthurian scholar Thomas Malory, given his real name is Sebastian Malory. Jacob Van Neck wasn't a vampire, but he was a real guy, an explorer who helped found the Dutch East India Company back at the turn of the 1600s. Even Lakshmi Bai was a real person, an Indian queen who opposed British rule in the 1850s. So her stealing the Order's gamer subs to live beyond her real-world death in 1858 to take part in the events of the game, sure, Why not? And Nikola Tesla slots into the setting perfectly. I wish I had more time to look more closely into the histories of these myths and real-world figures to see if the Order 1886 attempted to adapt their characters in as much detail as the London setting, but given how badly they massacred my poor sweet boy Marquis de Lafayette, I doubt it. The real Lafayette died in 1834 at the healthy age of 76. He certainly wasn't a good shave away from being a twink 52 years later in the 1880s. Now it's here we could say he's just addicted to prime and it's kept him young, but I don't get that sense from what we see of him. He acts like a rookie, and when the Lord Chancellor offers him a sip of the bubbly, it's treated like it's his first dose. I can't be sure though, because the game never makes clear whether or not it is, and even if it isn't, the Grail doesn't grant eternal youth. Percival and the Lord Chancellor are still aging despite being centuries old, which means Lafayette must have been involved since at least the 1770s, so why does he not seem to know how the Order works? I was hoping the developers would have an explanation in one of those puff pieces Sony forced them to do, presumably at gunpoint, but while they do mention Lafayette being a bit green around the gills, there's no reason given as to why he's still walking around so long after his death. Even his characterization is quite basic. He mentions he survived 2 revolutions here in the Order 1886, but in life he lived through 4: the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the July Revolution, and... And if he did get access to the Grail's Blackwater early, it means he'd also have experienced the revolutions of 1848 and the Paris Commune. Assuming those even happened in this version of history, it's impossible to tell given how little it actually says about the setting. Lafayette's characterization as a womanizing rogue whose true love is freedom comes off as very American too, flattening the real man's complexities down to jingoistic key jangling for an audience who may not be familiar with the real man. This is where Ready at Dawn's attention to historical detail comes back to bite them in the arse. I imagine they went with Lafayette because they wanted someone a little more relatable to American audiences in the squad, but in that case, why not just choose an American? Wyatt Earp would fit right in, given he's got the same sort of mythic status as the Arthurian Knights of Legend. Why would Lafayette be in London at all, given those 2 revolutions he's so fond of bringing up were largely spent at war with Britain? So if this is how the Order 1886 chooses to treat the one historical figure I do know a little about, I can't imagine the others fare much better. Lafayette loves liberty, Tesla gets in a reference to Thomas Edison, Jansi is name-dropped as the kingdom Lakshmi Bai ruled, Jacob Van Neck is still running the United India Company, and that is as deep as it goes. Which I think is a shame, because I wouldn't know about Lakshmi Bai if not for this game. Indian history is one area I'm not well versed in, and Ready at Dawn had a great opportunity to introduce her and her achievements to a similarly uninformed Western audience. But no, she's just here, because Assassin's Creed always has a lot of historical figures too, I guess. And you may well ask, why does it matter? It's fiction, it's alternate history, Ready at Dawn can do what they want, and I'd be fine with that if they hadn't also gone to such great lengths to insist they were aiming for a completely believable setting in spite of the supernatural elements. Werewolves, vampires, airships, I can accept those things because Ready at Dawn put in the effort to ground them within the setting, but having someone like Lafayette appear unexplained undermines that foundation of realism to the point that it just collapses. And maybe them saying that was just corporate fluff, but I don't get that sense given the Order 1886 often stays so grounded it ends up hurting the game. Take the United India House. The building might be opulent, but it doesn't have the spectacle of the Agamemnon, nor the lived-in naturalistic design of Blackwall Yard. The lack of environmental storytelling aboard the Agamemnon made sense, since space was at a premium. But this is a palace. There should be more to it than a lot of marble and the odd painting. There's no history here the way there was to the streets of Mayfair or Whitechapel, just like there's no history to the Order itself. I even went through each and every collectible in the game hoping to find something, anything to give some depth to the setting, and there's there's just nothing. Pretty much all of them are just like, hello, it is 1886. You get name drops like Charles Dickens and Carl Benz and Sir Francis Galton. Yuck. All the objects you're allowed to inspect feel like the dud clues sprinkled around crime scenes in LA Noire. A tin of tea, a model boat, a Union flyer, rebel propaganda so on the nose even Garth Marenghi would be like, hey, can we tone it down a bit? Or fucking nothing at all. Just an empty cabinet. The photographs you can find are just that. Photographs. Very occasionally you might get an extra comment from Grayson, like here where he casually reveals he took part in the British invasion of India, and yeah, I believe that.
It's been a while since my last journey to East India.
The newspapers mostly just refer back to the events that happened earlier in the plot, like Sentinel 5's artillery strike on Whitechapel, or the Agamemnon falling on top of the Crystal Palace, or the rebels' attack on Westminster Bridge. Wait, Proverty? There are a few merciful exceptions to this rule. Lakshmi's death certificate being in Lord Hastings' possession speaks to their rivalry. A newspaper wondering where Queen Victoria's gone actually builds a little intrigue, even if the question is never brought up in the plot itself. There's a letter from Charles Darwin addressed to Lord Hastings about his discovery of half-breeds in New Guinea, which is fun. It even comes with a set of coordinates, and when I punched them into a map, it landed me dead center of the island, right on the border between Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. So, you know, A for effort I guess. It's only through searching out the collectibles that you learn the rebellion even has a name, too. The Ravens of London. Which could be a reference to the tower, but just as likely may not be. And then there are the audio logs. Most of them are completely worthless, just recitations of famous works like The Death of Arthur, or the Ramayana, or lullabies, or pieces of music. A couple of them do add a little to the world, like the Agamemnon's evac plan I showed earlier, and I especially like this one where the speaker is unfamiliar with the technology and so bumbles his way through the recording.
Right, is this contraption working? Right, no, I know, but yeah, alright, speaking to this thing, alright. Alright. Gotta get me speaking voice ready. Alright. October 13th, 1886.
But then there are the logs left by the anarchist leader. There are a bunch to be found throughout the game, and they all boil down to the man reacting to what happened in the last chapter, only to declare, I have no idea what's going on. He doesn't offer any deeper insight into the situation. It's just a lot of well-performed vague nothings that climaxes with this absolute banger of a line.
I have yet to understand why all this has happened.
Slap that on the back of the fucking box. The anarchists' audio logs are another reason I don't think much thought was put into character or plot, because at one point the guy is like, maybe we could sway Lafayette to our cause and get our own man on the inside of the order, despite the fact he was an outspoken constitutional monarchist. Or this recording where he suggests Doyle might be one of them, but maybe not, it's hard to tell. And the biggest bombshell he drops right at the end is that the anarchists aren't the rebellion. They're separate groups. They spent months infiltrating the United India Company only for their spies to be killed by Grayson and Lakshmi during their attack on the Blackwall docks. So that's at least 2 legitimately innocent men killed despite the UIC being the villains. Well done on that. But overall, I genuinely can't tell why these audio logs are here, or who the anarchists are, other than to guess their leader may be Percival's mysterious stranger. But that doesn't seem likely either, since the logs never mention Tesla already being their guy on the inside. So even when you pull back the layers and look at the setting as a whole, there's just very little to talk about. Again, it's a good baseline, but it needed more than that to support a franchise. Never mind this single game. And it's the same at every level of the plot. Igraine and Lucan are siblings, a fact I have been able to ignore this whole video because they do not interact once. Even when they're in the same room, they talk exclusively with other people. From a narrative standpoint, they might as well be strangers. I honestly think Igraine turning out to be the werewolf traitor would work way better given those subtle scars on her neck. That way Lucan could still serve as a red herring, or even remain in on the UIC conspiracy out of loyalty to his sister. Actually turn him into the tragic villain torn between two worlds the game is trying to present him as, rather than the obvious twist he is in truth. What do the werewolves actually want? Lucan says they're just fighting fighting for their right to live, but that means nothing without further context. They're not aligned with the rebellion, so it can't be civil rights, but who knows? Why are they working with vampires? Why are there vampires at all? Why does Lord Hastings need Lucan's help when he's already got the Order wrapped around his finger, and has the most powerful company in the history of the world at his beck and call? And why are they trying to export vampires to America? What does it mean? Remember that werewolf we saw killing the Queen's Guard back in the prologue? I still don't know who that was. Lucan, I guess? He's the only werewolf left, unless it was the Lycan captured in Chapter 1, who, like the Rebel captured in Chapter 3, is banished from reality the second they're dragged off screen. And speaking of the Rebels, they are just as incompetent as the Order. Their plan to murder Hastings aboard the Agamemnon could have been achieved simply by waiting until the airship was over the Atlantic before setting off the bombs they smuggled in. There was no need to launch this huge public attack on the guy even before they learned Percival and the gang had sneaked on board, though I can't be too surprised when the first step of Lakshmi's plans tends to be get caught immediately. There's also the fact that all their power is stolen from the Order. Lakshmi took the Prime from a dead knight, the foot soldiers had Tesla smuggle in steampunk weapons for them. Intentionally or not, the game frames them as parasites even after Grayson stops ripping and tearing his way through them, a plot point that's never resolved. All those men he killed in the first half of the game, completely forgotten about. Lakshmi, Devi, and Finley never bring them up once. When Grayson coming to terms with that, or having to earn back the rebellion's trust, or his involvement causing a rift between Lakshmi and the others, could have been used to great narrative effect. But no, the second he swaps sides, they trust him implicitly, and he's never forced to confront what he's done. It sucks. Devi as a character is pointless. Her every appearance has her shoved out of the plot almost instantly, and she just keeps coming back like the actress is fighting for more screen time, when she could have served perfectly well as Lord Hastings' victim in Chapter 11. We may not know Devi much, but we know her better than fucking Finley. Looping back to the werewolves though, there's a weird undercurrent of essentialism going on with the half-breeds that the game never addresses, and I don't have time to interrogate, but it just keeps jumping out at me as I'm editing the video. They're just assumed to be evil because it's in their nature, and nothing Lucan does challenges that assumption. Nothing any of the werewolves do does. But the worst aspect of the writing by far is the fact no one tells anyone anything, even when they really should, because if they did, the plot would fall apart after one conversation. It's obvious Ready at Dawn had certain story beats and character concepts they wanted in there, but it doesn't amount to anything. I don't think these characters could answer the questions raised by the plot even if they wanted to. Because the writing is so anemic, I doubt they were written with answers in mind. Just fun what-if scenarios that Ready at Dawn could kick down the road for a sequel to pick up. More than anything, it feels like a bad season of television, in a very modern way too. Another aspect of the Order 1886 that was ahead of its time. It's a stillborn franchise of the streaming era, and it ends on just as unsatisfying a note as one too. Chapter 12, R2. Lucan has already ransacked Tesla's lab by the time you reach it, but the lad is still alive, so Grayson drops him somewhere safe and heads inside to finish things for good.
You and I, we are not that different.
Shut up. You get teased with this cool new gun Tesla was working on, but Lucan ambushes Grayson before you get to test it out, and then it's back to fighting, first with knives. Oh my fucking god, just kiss. And then with claws. People gave the Order 1886 a lot of shit for just copy-pasting the earlier werewolf fight from Chapter 4 in as a final boss, but honestly, it's fine. The attacks and dodges might be the same, you're still barred from using the L1 special or environmental weapon until Phase 2 as well, but the real meat of the fight, the cinematics in between each section, are completely different and a lot of fun. You can't actually win the fight. Grayson and Lucan just sort of beat each other to a stalemate and then start getting philosophical.
I've seen things I am condemned to remember. Civilizations born and destroyed by humanity's incessant greed. The pride of men slaughtering each other in the name of their so-called God.
We will atone for our sins in time. But how can you justify the atrocities your kind have committed?
What atrocities? Mr. Fuck the Provos? Name one. Name a single atrocity a werewolf has committed this whole game, when you've gone out of your way to disobey direct orders conducting illegal raids, to maximize casualties, to do incalculable damage to vital city infrastructure, to torture people for information. They killed like 10 people and one called you a pig. What are you talking about, you fucking dog?
My son.
Father. Forgive me.
It is I who needs your forgiveness.
He's always known Lucan was a Lycan because he killed Lucan's Lycan parents.
Your father died by my sword. But a child? You didn't deserve such a fate. How could I have taken the life of an innocent?
Very easily. Also, you know what this means? When Lucan joined the Order, the Lord Chancellor bestowed that name upon him knowing he was a Lycan. Sir Lucan is a real Knight of the Round Table from legend, but there are like 150 of the fuckers. Way more than appear in the Order. You couldn't give him a slightly less incriminating title, like, I don't know, Mordred?
The revelation would shake our order to its very foundations.
How? Explain to me how. Actually, you know what? I don't fucking care anymore. Anyway, the Lord Chancellor can't bear to kill his own son, so he hands the revolver over to Grayson, and then he just leaves. And I was so hoping Grayson would just shoot him in the back, but no. Got to keep him around for that sequel. And then it gives you the prompt. R2. It may not have the mimetic potential of press F to pay respects, but I think from a tonal perspective, it's actually worse. This is meant to be a big emotional moment. An anvil upon which the status quo is shattered by the hammer of the Lord Chancellor's revolver striking the chambered bullet. But the game simply did not put in the effort to make it work. It's not even about whether the moment is earned. There's simply nothing to support it. I don't know Sir Lucan. I barely know Grayson, and he's been nothing but a self-righteous fuckwit all game. I don't understand how Lucan being revealed to be a Lycan would destroy the Order. I don't know why he's working with Hastings, or why the Lord Chancellor wouldn't immediately suspect him as the traitor when he knows he's a fucking werewolf. When Naked Snake stood over the boss in a field of white flowers and pulled the trigger in Metal Gear Solid 3, a moment the Order 1886 is clearly pulling from here, it was built upon dozens of hours of characterization. I knew the boss the way Naked Snake knew her, and understood the unfairness of her death, the sacrifice of not just her life, but her reputation, her legacy, for the sake of her country. When Metal Gear Solid forced me to pull that final trigger, it hurt. When the Order 1886 forced me to pull this final trigger, it was offensive. A desperate appeal to overwrought melodrama to offset the lack of an actual conclusion, or even a narrative climax. You've mowed down armies of men throughout the Order 1886 without a second thought. But no, you see, this time it's sad, because Lucan is rich. After the credits, you're treated to a brief epilogue. Galahad looks out across London, having reached his final form. No longer a Knight of the Round Table, but the Dark Knight. Tesla hits him with one last round of exposition, like it matters.
The Council has declared martial law throughout the city. There is no telling when the authorities will decide to mount an offensive. Now is not the time for heroics. I would advise we follow Lady Lakshmi's lead and leave the city.
Grayson reminds him he's no longer a knight, and that's it. The tone of the scene hints at big things to come, that this is Grayson's darkest hour, that the Order will never be the same, but genuinely what has changed. Grayson is still friends with Tesla and Lafayette, Lakshmi and Devi have left London, so they're not in any immediate danger. Hastings is still going around being Jack the Ripper. Percival and Lucan are dead, but they didn't actually do anything of narrative importance while they were alive. The Stranger was so tight-lipped, we still don't know his fucking name. The UIC's plot to export vampires to America has been thwarted, but the stakes of that conflict was so vague it offers no sense of triumph. Likewise, the Order was so vaguely defined that losing 3 members in quick succession over the course of the game has left no impact on me as a player. I have no idea what state the organisation is in as a result of those changes, because I have no idea what state the organisation was in to begin with, which is part of the reason why I wish Grayson had blown the Lord Chancellor's brains out. That, at least, would have been an action of lasting consequence. I think the only genuine change is Igraine's switch from love interest to tragic villainess. A switch built on real shaky foundations that required everyone involved to be a massive fucking idiot, and even that was left incomplete by how she just vanishes from the plot. But whatever, Grayson is Batman, Tesla is Alfred, and the stage is finally set for the story to really begin. Except it never did. And that stings a lot more in 2026 than it did in 2015. Leaving so much of the plot unresolved didn't bother me at the time of release because there was still a chance of a sequel, however slight, in spite of the mixed reviews. I wasn't holding my breath or anything, but stranger things have happened. It seemed possible in 2015. It doesn't in 2026. And yet, I still hope there is, because I need to know where they were taking it. What was the plan? What was the end game? Chapter 13.
Is this the England we want?
The potential is there. Like, I saw it with my own eyes, the potential for this game, and it's just a failure to execute. And it doesn't seem like they, as a studio, failed. It seems like people were telling them, rush this, do that, change this. Like, you can feel the boardroom moments added to this game.
Time puts everything into perspective. Tempers cool, contracts end, potential turns to waste. Now that over a decade has passed and people are free to speak a little more openly, developers from Ready at Dawn have come out of the woodwork to talk through what happened. Jesse Cox hit the nail right on the head before the game even released. Ready at Dawn had supporters higher up the chain of command at Sony, but an internal restructuring during development lifted them out of reach. They also didn't have the benefit of the doubt offered to first-party studios because despite their association with the PSP, Ready at Dawn wasn't owned by Sony. Early builds of the Order 1886 wowed the publisher with their presentation, but as a result, the new men in charge expected it to only get better.
There was a particular milestone where we said, you're going to get gray boxes, you're going to get ugly shit running poorly because we need to work on these systems, we need the time. And I kid you not, we get back, we can't show this to the higher-ups. They're going to lose faith. We need to see the same level of fidelity that we saw before. We can't show this.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, we'll get back to that, but we need to do this. Say that you have all these milestones, and a milestone come out, and maybe it's not exactly what they hoped for, right? There are some things to discuss. I ask you, what sense does it make that the immediate response to that is no payment? You cannot make payroll unless you receive constant stream of payments from the publisher.
Yeah.
You got 100 people under you. Now all of a sudden it's like, I don't want to say it's blackmail, but it's really what it is. The milestone, you need to rework this. Until then, no payment. So you're constantly under this threat. You can never. How does that help?
Add in a healthy dollop of industry standard crunch, and it sounds like a lot of the Order's development was spent just fighting to find time to make the game at all, which we've been seeing the whole video in all the little mistakes that snuck through into the final version.
It's tough because we're an external studio, kind of working first party. And Sony, as I understand it, needed that game to come out, and we made some sacrifices, but we really hope to make a sequel after that.
So much had to be ripped out as a result, and that caused a domino effect where changing one thing unintentionally changed all the things around it.
For example, a lot of people dinged us for the fact that we didn't have a multiplayer in the game, which I understand, but at the same time, we did do a multiplayer in the first year of development. We also realized we didn't have the budget and the time to do it. And together with Sony, we decided to kill it in year 2. And we had a functioning multiplayer also. It was a lot of fun, but again, 2 different games to make with one team.
People have talked about the story, we grew up with these characters for 5-6 years. And at the end, when you start a game, you always start with, 100 things you want to do. And that as things go forward, it gets reduced to 80, then to 60, then to 40. It's impossible to do otherwise. It happens every time. Some of the characters were so well written and well defined in the original story that in our minds, they were, completely clear and incredibly well developed. But then as the story got reduced, some of them in the final game didn't seem quite as, as deep as they were in the original thing. But from the inside of the team, it's very difficult to see that because, you have the background in your head.
Even then, Ru Wirasuriya claims about a third of the campaign was cut a few months before release, which is just wild. I can't even imagine where that third would go. Toward the end, I'm assuming, but whether the cut content would have slotted in between already existing sections or expanded beyond the final battle, I genuinely can't tell.
So much was cut, that a lot of the more subtle narrative parts were lost because so much was chopped away, and things that were supposed to be interactive became a movie, and things that were we were like desperate, we had to ship.
Pacino claims another year probably would have been enough to achieve their vision for the game, but the February 2015 launch date stuck, and when the 20th arrived, Ready at Dawn braced for impact. According to Pacino, they knew the game was lacking in certain ways, that it wasn't going to be a mega hit, but they believed the foundation of setting and mechanics built by the Order 1886 would be enough to carry it across the finish line. Yet when the press got its hands on the Order, they tore it to shreds, to say nothing of how caustic the audience reaction was. It's hard to say whether or not that would have happened if not for the leak, but after playing the Order 1886 for review myself, I can't fault the low scores. It got exactly what it deserved, and is ultimately the reason the Order 1887 never happened.
There was an eagerness to like the game. People didn't, but they wanted to like it.
And Ready at Dawn fought for that sequel. Articles started popping up in mid-2016, almost in an attempt to gauge public interest, but it never went anywhere, which Pacino seems to have made peace with.
It would have been an incredible sequel, I can tell you that for a fact. We pitched the sequel to Sony, in fact, regardless of all of this stuff, and in a way, it's better that they passed. Because if we thought we were going to be screwed before, man, with that sequel, we would have signed our, life away. We were going to do it just because we wanted to deliver it to the players. And
publisher problems aside, Ready at Dawn did definitely bite off more than they could chew.
Then you also realize that you don't want to redo the same thing over and over again. You don't want to be like, all right, let's build 3 mechanics and that's all you're going to get for the whole game. We went the route of like, all right, we're going to make all these little things, those subtle pace changes. It's not what games usually do. Games have a tendency to basically rely on a couple of pillars and, kind of work through those pillars again and again. What we did here was just, we wanted to change the pace on people. We wanted to make a game that didn't feel like what everybody could get out of another game.
And I completely understand that mindset, but there's a reason games do tend to focus on one mechanical mode above all else. Feature creep is a cancer that kills more titles than it elevates, and Wirasuriya and Pacino know that. Quote, I think the shortcomings come from so much concentration on building an IP at the very beginning. We were so dead set on making sure this IP had a foundation, a big foundation, that stories could be told so many different ways, end quote. It's not even a realization they've come to in hindsight either. They knew better than anyone what the Order 1886 was before it released, but even if the final product wasn't what they wanted it to be, the work Ready at Dawn did, at least on the technical side of things, is still really impressive. Eventually Ready at Dawn was acquired by Facebook, and then the studio was shut down altogether, so the likelihood of an Order 1887 ever happening is pretty slim. But 1886 is in the middle of its own little renaissance. Digital Foundry Foundry recently got it running at 60 frames per second with a 16:9 aspect ratio, and every so often you'll find an article or video saying the game is worth a second chance. But I simply don't agree with that, and I honestly feel bad for tearing into the game so hard after watching all these retrospective interviews, hearing all the shit Ready at Dawn had to put up with on the business end of things, how the trauma of that experience still affects them. But then I think back to Grayson torturing a defenseless man for information on Westminster Bridge, and it's just so grotty. It may not have been the England they wanted, but it's certainly the England they made. Chapter 14. What made The Order 1886 a failure? Ha! What didn't? Sony screwed Ready at Dawn over by expecting the world and selling the game on that promise to an audience hungry for a killer app. Ready at Dawn shot themselves in the foot by spreading their attentions too thin in what little time they had, and gaming culture at large does so love a punching bag. It's one of those perfect disasters where you can't really place the blame on a single point of failure. The whole thing was rotten from start to finish. Much as I've raked The Order over the coals this video, I really do feel for Ru Wirasuria and Andrea Pacino and the rest of the developers, because Sony definitely did throw them under the bus to some extent. A late game may eventually be great, but a rushed game is rushed forever, and that's how The Order 1886 is remembered. Had Ready at Dawn been given the extra time they needed to polish off that missing third, it's possible The Order could have released to acclaim, but honestly, I doubt it. I don't see how more combat would improve things mechanically. I think you'd need a complete overhaul of encounter design to make it as engaging as it becomes in the final few levels, which just leaves the focus on cinematic storytelling, and I don't think I need to repeat myself by this point. The Order's plot isn't even a first draft in need of an edit, it's a back-of-the-box blurb with nothing to support it. Quote, "Uncover history's darkest secret," end quote, the box actually claims, but having played the game, I genuinely don't know what that tagline is referring to. Is it the vampires? It can't be the Order, they're not a secret. And it's this lack of care in the storytelling, even in the world building, where the Order's ugliest qualities emerge. The long cutscenes, snappy presentation, and British stuffiness aspire to something greater. But in truth, The Order 1886 is no better than any mid-2010s military shooter, something that was not lost on critics at the time. Which is why when Ru Wirasuria and Andrea Pacino say Ready at Dawn had such great plans for The Order 1887, I have to take it with a grain of salt. They got screwed on time and money. I totally believe that. And a good editor could turn this into something better. But if the foundations of a story worthy of a multi-game franchise existed, you wouldn't need a sequel to prove it. You'd see it in The Order 1886. It would be present at the margins, in the collectibles, bursting at the seams of the background. The devs would be desperate to hint at all the cool shit they came up with that they just couldn't show you yet, and The Order simply doesn't. There's no evidence of that deeper story, at least not that I can see. I would still love a sequel, genuinely, but I can't imagine a world in which the story doesn't end here, unfinished and bereft of momentum, because there's simply not enough narrative fuel to propel it onward to a climax, much less a continuation. It's not an inherently bad concept, but the execution was rotten to the core, and is only getting worse as time goes on. I get it. It's easy to get attached to a bad idea, or a bad way to go about a good idea, and the gaming industry is really too rigid in its finances to justify a last-minute pivot unless the early public buzz is really bad. But it's what The Order 1886 desperately needed if it wanted to succeed. Had it picked a mechanical lane between cover shooting and quick-time event-heavy cinematics, had it shipped with an actual climax, or even a few answers, rather than leaving the narrative cut short, had it starred compelling characters worthy of the legacy of King Arthur and his knights, had it offered anything of substance beyond the perfect presentation, I think The Order 1886 would be remembered very differently. What made the game a failure? The same thing people remember it for today. The presentation, ahead of its time by decades, at the cost of leaving everything else behind. The Order 1886 failed every single QuickTime event on its way out the door. Almost every single creative and mechanical decision it made was the wrong one, and it remains one of the most frustrating games I've ever played. But I will give it this. it was never boring. Chapter 15. Conclusion. When people today say the Order 1886 is worth your time, I get it, because there are things to like about it, but they're far outweighed by the negatives. This is not a diamond in the rough hidden gem. The story is terrible, its politics, intentionally or not, are disgusting, and the gunplay only really comes into its own right before the credits. It's no surprise Bloodborne killed its stone dead, though the great irony is that game still hasn't received a sequel either. Still, there's something weirdly compelling about the Order 1886. I understand why people are coming back to it, because a car crash in slow motion is a curious thing to experience, especially now that enough time has passed to remove yourself from the path of the vehicle regarding the hefty price tag. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, truly one of the worst to ever do it. Like, what was the plan? I genuinely have no idea where the series could have gone, other than some sort of eventual confrontation with a grain. But short of Wu Wirasaria or Andrea Pacino letting me pick their brains about where the franchise was headed, I suppose I'll just have to content myself with the questions alone. But hey, we've finally got stakes, intrigue, tone, action. I guess Ready at Dawn did understand the narrative function of a prologue after all. It's just a shame they never got to show us the first chapter. Thanks for watching. And that's the video. Before I go, I'd like to thank by name the people supporting me with $5 US a month or more on Patreon. Anonymous, Abril, Azazel, Cass, Hawkwing2652, Hey Matey, Heavy, Jeffiet, Jeff Ladd, Captain Ketchup, Operator Error, Paranoid Android, Reaper2122, Sir King of 100 Knights, Smingless, Sarah Bloomer, Smorsky, Sneezy McGlassface, Space Quest Historian, The Official 476, This Sauerkraut, Thomas Angel, Thomas Elliott, Tree3, Angry Bees, Ursa, and Zeke the Phantom. Thank you so much. These lovely people chose the topic of this video. It was meant to be short. I don't think any of us expected I'd end up opening Pandora's box, but we're out the other side now, and I can finally get back to dinosaurs and horror games. I'll see you then. Thanks again for watching. You have betrayed our order! No one may escape the penalty! You think we'll get to shoot a few of them rich folk? Is it true? Did the Lord Chancellor fight by Arthur's side? Fucking hell.
You swine.
I heard many great things about the Agamemnon, Lord Hastings. Rules of engagement, monsieur? The late Sebastian Mallory did not perish in the fight against the half-breeds. It is only by the mercy of Providence that an even greater disaster was avoided. Fuck the army. This is my fight. This allegation is monstrous. I refuse to believe it. I will not permit. I ask the council to impose the supreme penalty. Should you threaten the... I can't. I have to stop doing the voice. Should you threaten the... Okay. Focus. Should you threaten the... I can't fucking do it. Should you threaten the cause of liberty? It's getting worse. Should you threaten the cause of liberty, you can count on Lafayette to be your sworn enemy. Holy fuck.